The year was 1876, and Evelyn Hartwell fled Boston with nothing but shame and a ring mark still pale on her finger. Her fiancé's betrayal had shattered everything she believed about love. But in a dusty Wyoming town, a quiet rancher named Silas Reed would teach her that some men don't promise to fix what's broken. They just hold you steady while you rebuild yourself. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The stagecoach lurched violently over another rut in the trail, and Evelyn Hartwell's forehead struck the wooden frame hard enough to leave a mark. She didn't cry out. Pain had become a constant companion these past 3 months, and physical discomfort barely registered anymore compared to the ache that had taken permanent residence in her chest. Outside the dusty window, the landscape had transformed so completely from Boston that it might as well have been another planet. Gone were the neat brick townhouses, the cobblestone streets, the manicured parks where ladies promenaded in their finest silks. Here, the world stretched endlessly in rolling plains of golden grass, interrupted only by distant purple mountains that seemed to mock her with their indifferent majesty. "You're so small," they seemed to say. "Your problems are nothing." Perhaps they were right. Evelyn pressed her gloved hand against the glass, watching her breath fog the surface. She was 26 years old, educated at Miss Pemberton's Academy for Young Ladies, fluent in French and passably competent in German, accomplished at the pianoforte, and utterly, completely ruined. The ring mark on her left hand had finally started to fade, but she could still see it if she looked closely enough. A pale band of skin where Charles Whitmore's engagement ring had sat for 8 months. 8 months of planning a wedding that would unite two of Boston's most prominent families. 8 months of embroidering linens with initials that would never be hers. 8 months of believing that she had found love, security, and a future. 8 months of being a fool. The other passenger in the coach, a traveling salesman who'd boarded in Cheyenne, had given up trying to make conversation somewhere around the second hour. Evelyn was grateful. She had no energy for pleasantries, no interest in explaining herself to strangers. Let him think her rude or odd. It didn't matter anymore. Nothing mattered except getting as far from Boston as geography would allow. The memory came unbidden, as it always did, walking into the Whitmore study unannounced, eager to surprise Charles with the news that her father had agreed to increase her dowry. The door had been slightly ajar. She'd heard voices inside, Charles's smooth baritone and another woman's breathless laughter. "Darling, you can't be serious. That frigid little bookworm." "Desperate times, my dear. Her father's shipping fortune will clear my debts and then some. Once we're married, I'll have full control of her inheritance. We can be together properly then." "And what if she discovers the truth?" "She won't. She's too trusting, too naive. She actually believes I love her." More laughter, the sound of kissing, the rustle of expensive fabric. Evelyn had stood frozen in the hallway, her hand still raised to knock, feeling something fundamental inside her crack and splinter like ice on a warming pond. The engagement ring had suddenly felt impossibly heavy on her finger, a shackle rather than a promise. She'd fled. Not just the house, but the confrontation, the scandal, the inevitable social death that would follow. She'd gone straight to her father's office and told him everything in a voice that didn't shake, that didn't break, that sounded like it belonged to someone else entirely. To his credit, Henry Hartwell had been furious. At Charles? Not at her. He'd wanted to challenge the scoundrel, to drag the Whitmore name through every newspaper in Boston, but Evelyn had begged him not to. The shame would destroy their family's reputation as thoroughly as Charles's. Better to quietly break the engagement, claim incompatibility, and let the gossips make of it what they would. But gossip had its own truth, and somehow, the story had twisted. By the time it circulated through Boston's drawing rooms, Evelyn had become the jilter rather than the jilted, cold, demanding, impossible to please. Poor Charles Whitmore, saddled with such a difficult woman. Thank goodness he'd escaped before legally binding himself to such a shrew. Her mother had tried to manage the damage, but even Eleanor Hartwell's considerable social skills couldn't overcome the whispers. Invitations dried up. Former friends crossed the street to avoid conversation. At church, old ladies who'd known Evelyn since childhood clucked their tongues and shook their heads, as if she'd committed some unforgivable sin rather than been the victim of a calculating fraud. The final straw had come at the Alderson ball, when Margaret Alderson, once Evelyn's closest friend, had asked with false sweetness if it was true that Evelyn had made unreasonable demands about the wedding budget. The implication was clear. She'd been too expensive, too difficult, too much for any reasonable man to tolerate. Evelyn had excused herself to the ladies' retiring room and stayed there until her father came to take her home. She hadn't attended another social function after that. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from cousin Beatrice Monroe in Wyoming Territory. Beatrice, who'd married a frontier merchant and moved west 5 years ago, who sent yearly Christmas cards with enthusiastic descriptions of life in Willow Creek. The letter was full of news about the town's growth, the new school that desperately needed a qualified teacher, the fresh air and open spaces that could heal any troubled spirit. "Come visit," Beatrice had written. Or better yet, "Come stay." Nobody here knows anything about Boston society, and they won't care even if they did. Out here, people judge you by what you do, not by who your family is or what rumors follow you. You could have a fresh start, Evie. You could breathe again. Evelyn had read that letter 17 times before making her decision. Her father had tried to dissuade her. Wyoming was rough, dangerous, uncivilized. Her mother had wept, but Evelyn had been resolute. Boston held nothing for her anymore except suffocation and shame. So here she was, 3,000 miles from everything familiar, rattling through a landscape so vast and empty it made her feel like she might simply dissolve into the horizon. The salesman cleared his throat. "First time out west, miss?" Evelyn kept her eyes on the window. "Yes." "Willow Creek's a decent enough town," he continued, apparently interpreting her monosyllable as encouragement. "Small, but growing. Got a good mercantile, a proper hotel, even a church. The saloon can get rough on Saturday nights, but that's frontier life for you." "I see. You got family there?" "A cousin." "That's good. That's good. Woman shouldn't travel alone out here. Too much can happen." Evelyn finally turned to look at him. He was middle-aged with mutton chop whiskers and kind eyes. Probably meant well. Probably genuinely concerned. "I appreciate your consideration, sir, but I assure you I'm quite capable." His expression suggested he doubted that, but he had the grace to return to his newspaper without further comment. The coach driver's shout cut through the afternoon air. "Willow Creek, 20 minutes!" Evelyn's stomach clenched. This was real. This was happening. In less than half an hour, she would step into a completely new life, surrounded by strangers who knew nothing of her past. She could be anyone here. She could reinvent herself entirely. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. As the coach crested a hill, the town came into view. A collection of wooden buildings clustered along a wide dirt street, with scattered homesteads spreading out into the surrounding grassland. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still dusted with snow despite the late spring warmth. It was nothing like Boston's elegant brick and stone, but there was something honest about it, unpretentious, real. The coach rattled down the main street, past the mercantile, the hotel, a livery stable, and a building with a sign that read Monroe General Goods. That must be Beatrice's husband's store. The driver pulled the horses to a stop in front of the hotel, and dust billowed up around them. "End of the line, folks!" Evelyn gathered her carpet bag and reticule, her movements careful and deliberate. Through the window, she could see people moving about their business. Cowboys in dusty chaps, women in simple calico dresses, a group of children chasing a dog. Normal life, continuing as it always had, indifferent to one broken-hearted woman's arrival. The salesman descended first, then turned to offer his hand. Evelyn accepted it out of courtesy and stepped down onto the wooden sidewalk. The afternoon sun was warmer than she'd expected, and the air smelled of dust, horse, and something she couldn't quite identify. Sage, perhaps, or prairie grass. She was adjusting her bonnet when she heard a woman's voice. "Evie! Oh, Evie, you're finally here!" Beatrice Monroe came rushing across the street, skirts swirling, arms already outstretched. She'd filled out since moving west, her face sun-browned and healthy, her eyes bright with genuine joy. Before Evelyn could properly prepare herself, she was enveloped in a tight embrace. "Let me look at you." Beatrice pulled back, hands on Evelyn's shoulders. Her smile faltered slightly. "Oh, cousin, you've lost weight." The journey was long. It was more than the journey. Beatrice's eyes, the same hazel as Evelyn's own, held understanding and sympathy. But you're here now, and we're going to take care of you. James is managing the store, but he'll be so pleased to see you at supper. Come, let's get your trunk and get you settled. As they waited for the driver to unload the luggage, Evelyn became aware of curious eyes watching from various points along the street. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin. Let them look. She was done caring what people thought. Don't mind the stares, Beatrice said softly. New people are always interesting out here. Most of the attention is just curiosity. You'll be old news by next week. A tall man emerged from the saloon across the street, not drunk, just apparently finishing some business there. He wore a worn but clean chambray shirt, dark trousers, and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. There was something in the way he moved that caught Evelyn's attention despite herself. A quiet confidence, an economy of motion that spoke of strength held in check. He paused on the saloon porch, and for just a moment his gaze landed on her. Even at this distance, she felt the weight of it, not leering or presumptuous, just aware, noticing. Then he touched the brim of his hat in a small gesture of acknowledgement and continued on his way, disappearing into the livery stable. Who was that? The question came out before Evelyn could stop it. Beatrice followed her gaze. Oh, that's Silas Reed, owns the Double R Ranch north of town. Good man. Everyone says so anyway, keeps mostly to himself, but he's always fair in his dealings. Lost his wife to fever about 4 years back, no children. Tragic story. She lowered her voice. Some of the young ladies in town have set their caps for him, but he's shown no interest. Too busy working, I suppose, or maybe still grieving. I don't know him well personally. He doesn't come to town much except for supplies and church. Evelyn watched the space where he disappeared, feeling oddly unsettled. I see. Why do you ask? There was a teasing note in Beatrice's voice. No reason. Simply curious about the town's inhabitants. Beatrice's expression suggested she wasn't fooled, but she didn't press. Well, there's your trunk. Let's get you home. I've prepared the spare room, and I made your favorite apple tart this morning. You remember how? With cinnamon and a lattice crust? Exactly. Some things don't change, even 3,000 miles from Boston. The Monroe home was a modest 2-story frame house painted white with blue shutters, situated on a quiet side street away from the main commercial area. It had a small front garden where Beatrice grew vegetables and herbs, and a porch with 2 rocking chairs. Nothing like the Hartwell townhouse with its marble foyer and crystal chandeliers, but it looked welcoming, safe. Inside, everything was clean and simple. Braided rugs, homemade curtains, furniture that was functional rather than fashionable. Beatrice led her upstairs to a small bedroom with a window overlooking the garden. A quilt in shades of blue covered the bed, and there was a washstand with a pitcher and basin, a wardrobe, and a writing desk. It's not much, Beatrice began. It's perfect. Evelyn set down her carpetbag and turned to embrace her cousin properly. Thank you, Bea. Truly. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't. Hush! Family takes care of family. That's all there is to it. Beatrice squeezed her hands. Now, I'm going to let you rest and freshen up. Supper's at 6. James usually comes home around 5:30, so you'll have time to meet him before we eat. After Beatrice left, Evelyn removed her bonnet and gloves with shaking hands. The enormity of what she'd done suddenly crashed over her. She'd left everything, her parents, her home, her entire life, to come to a place where she knew almost no one, where she had no position, no prospects, no security beyond her cousin's kindness. She moved to the window and looked out at the unfamiliar landscape. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Children's laughter echoed from a nearby yard. Ordinary sounds of ordinary life. The ring mark on her finger caught her eye again. She rubbed it absently, trying to erase what couldn't be erased. She's too trusting, too naive. She actually believes I love her. Charles's words still had the power to make her feel small and stupid. How had she missed the signs? How had she been so blind? She prided herself on her intelligence, her education, her ability to think clearly. Yet she'd been completely fooled by a charming smile and pretty words. Maybe that was why the betrayal hurt so much. It wasn't just losing Charles. It was losing her faith in her own judgment. A knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Evie? Are you decent? Yes, come in. Beatrice entered carrying a tea tray. I thought you might need this. It's been a long day. They sat together by the window, sipping tea and talking about nothing in particular: the journey, the weather, Beatrice's garden, the new minister at the church. Safe topics, comfortable topics. But eventually, inevitably, Beatrice asked the question Evelyn had been dreading. How bad was it? In Boston, I mean. Your letters were vague. Evelyn set down her teacup carefully. It was bad enough that I couldn't stay. But your mother's last letter said the engagement was broken by mutual consent. Was that not true? Technically, it was mutual. I gave back the ring. Charles didn't object. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But the reasons for the break weren't what people thought. Evie. Beatrice leaned forward, her face earnest. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but if you do want to talk about it, well, I'm your cousin, your friend, and nothing you say will leave this room. The kindness in those words was almost Evelyn's undoing. She'd been so careful to maintain her composure, to not let anyone see how thoroughly she'd been shattered. But here, 3,000 miles from Boston, in this simple room with this woman who'd known her since childhood, the walls she'd built started to crack. He never loved me. The words came out flat, emotionless. He was marrying me for my inheritance. He had debts, gambling debts apparently, and my father's money was the solution. He was planning to take control of my dowry and continue his affair with someone else. Beatrice's hand flew to her mouth. Oh, Evie, no. I overheard them talking, him and his mistress. They were laughing about how naive I was, how easy I was to fool. She looked down at her hands. So I gave back the ring and told my father I'd changed my mind about the marriage. We agreed not to explain why. We thought it would be cleaner that way, less scandal. But the story got twisted. Yes, somehow I became the jilter instead of the jilted, cold, demanding, impossible to please. She laughed bitterly. The irony is that by trying to avoid scandal, we created a different kind. One where I'm the villain. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it is reality. Evelyn met her cousin's eyes. I couldn't stay there, Bea. Every social gathering, every church service, every walk down the street felt like running a gauntlet. The looks, the whispers, the former friends who suddenly didn't know me. I felt like I was suffocating. Beatrice was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, You know what I love about the frontier? What? People here care more about what you do than who you are. Back east, your family name and social standing matter more than your character. Out here, those things mean nothing. Can you teach? Can you ride? Can you work hard and treat people fairly? That's what matters. She reached over and squeezed Evelyn's hand. Nobody in Willow Creek cares about Boston gossip. They'll judge you on how you behave here, nothing else. I hope you're right. I know I'm right. You'll see. Beatrice stood, smoothing her skirts. Now, enough heavy talk. Let's get you ready to meet James properly. He's going to love you. I've told him all about my brilliant cousin from Boston, who can read Latin and play the pianoforte, and who once corrected a Harvard professor's translation of Virgil. Despite everything, Evelyn felt a small smile tug at her lips. I was 16, and the professor was very gracious about it. Because you were right. That's my point exactly. You're smart and capable, Evie. Don't let one scoundrel's betrayal make you forget that. After Beatrice left, Evelyn unpacked her trunk, hanging her dresses in the wardrobe and arranging her few books on the desk. She'd brought volumes of poetry, Wordsworth, Coleridge, Keats, and her precious copy of Jane Eyre, its pages softened by repeated readings. She'd also packed her journal, though she hadn't written in it since the day she'd discovered Charles's betrayal. She opened it now to the last entry, dated March 14, 1876. Charles surprised me with roses today. Pale pink, my favorite. He says he cannot wait for June, when I'll finally be his wife. I confess I share his impatience. To think that in just 3 months, I'll be Mrs. Charles Whitmore. Mother is beside herself with wedding preparations, and I've spent the afternoon with the seamstress discussing lace for my veil. Everything is perfect. Everything is exactly as I always dreamed. Looking at those words now, written in her own hopeful hand, made something twist painfully in Evelyn's chest. That girl, that naive, trusting girl, seemed like a stranger. Had she ever really been so innocent, so foolish? She turned to a fresh page and picked up her pen. For a long moment, she stared at the blank paper. Then, slowly, she began to write. June 3rd, 1876. Willow Creek, Wyoming Territory. I have traveled 3,000 miles to a place where no one knows my name or my shame. Cousin Beatrice has welcomed me with open arms and a kindness I don't deserve. The town is rough but honest, and the landscape is so vast it makes me feel simultaneously insignificant and strangely liberated. I saw a man today, a rancher named Silas Reed. There was something in the way he moved, the way he carried himself, that caught my attention. Not charming or polished like Charles, but solid, real. I don't know why I mention this. It means nothing. I'm trying not to think about Boston, about what I left behind, about the person I used to be. Beatrice says people here care more about what you do than who you are. I hope she's right. I hope I can rebuild myself into someone stronger, someone who won't be fooled again. I hope I can learn to trust again. But right now that seems impossible. She closed the journal and tucked it into the desk drawer. Through the window she could see the sun sinking toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. It was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way, so different from Boston's genteel sunsets over the harbor. A bell rang somewhere in the house. "Evie, James is home." Taking a deep breath, Evelyn checked her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand. She looked pale, tired, older than her 26 years. But her eyes were dry, her expression composed. Nobody looking at her would guess how thoroughly broken she felt inside. That was good. That was necessary. She'd learned the hard way that showing vulnerability only invited exploitation. From now on, she would be careful, guarded, self-sufficient. She would accept Beatrice's kindness and the teaching position if it was offered, and she would build a quiet, safe life here in Willow Creek. But she would never, ever let anyone close enough to hurt her again. Downstairs, James Monroe turned out to be a sturdy, good-natured man with thinning hair and a ready smile. He welcomed Evelyn warmly, shaking her hand with genuine enthusiasm. "Bee's been talking about your visit for weeks," he said. "It's good to have family around. This town needs more educated folks like yourself." Over supper, roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and the promised apple tart, they discussed the teaching position. The previous teacher, Miss Aldrich, had gotten married and moved to Cheyenne, leaving the school without proper instruction for the past month. "The school board is desperate," James explained. "They've been making do with volunteers, but it's not sustainable. When Bee mentioned you might be interested, I spoke to the board chairman, that's Reverend Thompson, and he was thrilled. They'd want to interview you, of course, but with your credentials, I can't imagine they'd turn you down." "What would the position entail?" Evelyn asked. "Teaching children ages 6 to 14, 5 days a week. Reading, writing, arithmetic, history, geography, the basics. The school's small, maybe 20 students on a good day. Some of the ranch families can't spare their children during planting and harvest seasons. Salary's $30 a month plus room and board if you need it, though of course you're welcome to stay here as long as you like." $30 a month. Less than what she'd spent on gloves in Boston. But it was honest work, and she'd always loved teaching. During her years at Miss Pemberton's academy, she'd often helped the younger girls with their lessons. "I'd like to meet with the board," she said. "When would be convenient?" "I'll arrange it for tomorrow afternoon if that suits you. Reverend Thompson is usually available after lunch." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed and listening to the unfamiliar sounds of a frontier town settling down for the evening, Evelyn found herself thinking about Silas Reed again, the rancher with the quiet presence and the careful way of moving. Beatrice had said he was a good man. She'd also said he'd lost his wife 4 years ago and hadn't shown interest in courting since. Good. That made him safe. A man who kept to himself, who minded his own business, who wouldn't intrude on her carefully constructed walls. Though even as she thought this, she remembered the weight of his gaze as he'd looked at her across the street. Not intrusive, not presumptuous, but noticing, seeing. She pushed the thought away and focused instead on practical matters. Tomorrow she would meet the school board. She would present herself as competent, professional, and unshakable. She would secure the position and begin building her new life. A fresh start, Beatrice had promised. A chance to breathe again. Evelyn closed her eyes and tried to believe it. The next morning dawned clear and bright, the kind of spring day that made everything seem possible. Beatrice lent her a simple green calico dress, more appropriate for Willow Creek than your Boston silks, and helped her arrange her dark hair in a modest style. "You look perfect," Beatrice declared. "Professional but approachable. Exactly what a schoolteacher should be." The church where Reverend Thompson kept his office was a modest white building with a tall steeple, situated at the far end of the main street. As they walked, Beatrice pointed out various establishments: the doctor's office, the telegraph station, the land office. "That's the Red Bear Saloon," she said, gesturing to a weathered building with a painting of a bear on its sign. "Rowdy on Saturday nights, but mostly harmless. James says the owner, Murphy, keeps things under control. And that's the blacksmith, Mr. Nakamura. Yes, he's from Japan originally, came here after working on the railroad. Makes beautiful ironwork." Evelyn absorbed it all, trying to memorize the layout of her new home. It was strange how small the town seemed compared to Boston, yet how complete. Everything necessary for life was here, just in miniature. As they approached the church, she noticed a wagon pulling up to the mercantile across the street. The driver climbed down, a tall figure in a dark hat, and she recognized Silas Reed even before he turned around. He was lifting crates from the wagon bed with easy strength, his movements efficient and unhurried. Almost as if he felt her watching, he glanced up. Their eyes met for just a second, and he nodded a brief acknowledgement before returning to his work. "That's the second time you've noticed him," Beatrice observed quietly. Evie, I'm not blind, and I'm not judging. I'm just saying, be careful. Silas is a good man, but he's also a complicated one. He doesn't let people in easily. I have no intention of... I know. You're not looking for romance. I understand. I'm just making an observation." Beatrice squeezed her arm gently. "Come on, let's not keep the Reverend waiting." Reverend Thompson turned out to be a balding man in his 50s with kind eyes and ink-stained fingers. He welcomed them warmly and ushered them into a small office lined with bookshelves. "Miss Hartwell, I cannot tell you how pleased we are that you're considering our little school. Your credentials are impressive. Miss Pemberton's Academy. We're honored to have someone of your education here in Willow Creek." "Thank you, Reverend. I'm grateful for the opportunity." They talked for over an hour about teaching methods, curriculum, the challenges of educating children with varying levels of preparation. Evelyn found herself relaxing as they discussed literature, mathematics, the importance of critical thinking. This was familiar territory, where her intelligence was an asset rather than a liability. "There's one thing I should mention," Reverend Thompson said toward the end. "Some of our students come from difficult circumstances. Ranch families where education isn't always prioritized. Children who've had inconsistent schooling. You might face challenges you didn't encounter at Miss Pemberton's." "I'm prepared for that," Evelyn assured him. "Every child deserves a quality education, regardless of their background." "That's exactly the attitude we need." He stood extending his hand. "Miss Hartwell, on behalf of the school board, I'd like to offer you the position. We'd want you to start Monday, if possible. That gives you a few days to settle in and prepare." "I accept." "Thank you, Reverend Thompson." Walking back to the Monroe house, Evelyn felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope, maybe, or purpose. She had a job, a position, a reason to get up in the morning that had nothing to do with social obligations or pleasing anyone else. "See," Beatrice said triumphantly, "I told you Willow Creek would be good for you." "It's one interview, Bea. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You're employed. That's worth celebrating. And speaking of which," she paused dramatically, "there's a barn raising at the Peterson Ranch on Saturday. The whole community will be there. It'll be a perfect chance for you to meet people before you start teaching their children." Evelyn's first instinct was to refuse. A large social gathering, full of strangers, all of whom would be curious about the new teacher from Boston. It sounded exhausting, but Beatrice was watching her with such hopeful expectation that she couldn't bring herself to disappoint her. "All right," she said slowly. "I'll go." "Wonderful. We'll have such a good time. And Evie," Beatrice's voice softened, "I know you're nervous about meeting people, but I promise folks here aren't like the ones in Boston. They're going to judge you on who you are now, not on whatever rumors might have followed you. Give them a chance." "I'll try." The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Eveline visited the schoolhouse, a one-room building with wooden desks, a blackboard, and shelves of worn books. It needed work, but it had good bones. She spent hours organizing materials, planning lessons, and trying to imagine the faces of the children who would sit in those desks. Saturday arrived too quickly. Beatrice insisted that Eveline borrow another of her dresses, a simple blue cotton that was much more suitable for a barn raising than anything you brought from Boston. She also lent her a bonnet with a wider brim. "The sun's strong out here," she explained. "You'll want protection." James drove them out to the Peterson Ranch in the wagon, along with baskets of food Beatrice had prepared: fried chicken, biscuits, berry preserves, and a chocolate cake. The ranch was about 5 miles from town, situated in a valley with a creek running through it. As they approached, Eveline could see dozens of wagons and horses gathered near a partially constructed barn. People were everywhere: men hauling lumber, women setting up food tables, children running and playing. The air rang with hammering, sawing, laughter, and conversation. "Now remember," Beatrice said as they climbed down from the wagon, "don't be overwhelmed. Just be yourself. These are good people." Eveline nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. And then she saw him. Silas Reed was up on the barn frame with several other men, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hat hanging by a cord down his back. He was hammering a beam into place, his movements sure and strong. As she watched, he said something that made the men around him laugh, though she was too far away to hear the words. There was something magnetic about him, not in Charles's polished, calculated way, but in something more fundamental. An aura of capability, of quiet command. This was a man who knew exactly who he was and didn't need anyone's approval. "Earth to Evie," Beatrice said, waving a hand in front of her face. "Sorry, I was just observing." Observing Silas Reed specifically. "I was not. Come on, let's get these food baskets to the tables, and then I'll introduce you around." The next hour was a whirlwind of names and faces. Mrs. Peterson, the barrel-shaped ranch wife with a hearty laugh. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, who ran the laundry. The Kowalski family with their 6 children. Doc Henderson, a gruff man with gentle hands. Sheriff Dalton, young and earnest. On and on until Eveline's head spun. Everyone was friendly, curious about the new teacher, eager to tell her about their children or grandchildren. It should have been overwhelming, but somehow it wasn't. These people had none of Boston's social artifice. They asked direct questions and expected direct answers. They judged her on her words and actions right now, not on some complicated social calculus of family connections and reputation. She was discussing reading primers with Mrs. Chen when someone cleared their throat behind her. "Excuse me, miss." Eveline turned and found herself looking up, way up, at Silas Reed. He was even taller up close, probably 6 feet or more, with broad shoulders and work-roughened hands. His face was sun-weathered but striking, with laugh lines around his gray-blue eyes and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. He'd put his hat back on, but strands of brown hair curled dampy at his temples. "Mr. Reed," she said, pleased that her voice came out steady. "I don't believe we've been properly introduced." "Silas Reed." He extended his hand. Eveline hesitated for just a moment. She'd grown wary of men's hands, of the promises they implied. But he was waiting patiently, his expression open and undemanding. She placed her hand in his. His grip was firm but careful, and he held her hand for exactly the appropriate amount of time before releasing it. "Welcome to Willow Creek, Miss Hartwell. I hear you're taking over the school." "Yes, starting Monday." "That's good. The kids need proper teaching. Miss Aldrich did her best, but she was pretty green." He paused. "I've got a nephew, my brother's boy, Noah. He's 8 and smart as a whip, but he's fallen behind since Miss Aldrich left. I hope you'll be patient with him." "Of course. Every child learns at their own pace." Something in his expression shifted. Approval, maybe, or respect. "That's a good answer. Some teachers don't see it that way." "Then they shouldn't be teachers." The corner of his mouth twitched upward. "No, I suppose they shouldn't." He touched the brim of his hat. "I should get back to work. Nice to meet you properly, Miss Hartwell." "And you, Mr. Reed." She watched him walk away, noting again that economy of movement, that quiet confidence, and something else. Something in the way he talked about his nephew with genuine affection, making sure she understood the boy was important to him. A man who cared about children, who wanted the best for them. Stop it, she told herself firmly. Stop reading anything into polite conversation. You're done with men, remember? Done with trust, done with hope, done with the whole dangerous game. Well now, said a voice at her elbow. Beatrice, of course, with that knowing smile. That was interesting. It was a perfectly ordinary introduction. He doesn't usually seek out introductions. Must have been curious about you. Or concerned about his nephew's education. Possibly. But I notice you didn't mention that the nephew in question, Noah Carson, is a perfectly healthy, bright boy who only missed a few weeks of school. Hardly fallen behind. Evelyn frowned. Then why did Mr. Reed say... Because he wanted an excuse to talk to you, obviously. Beatrice patted her arm. Like I said, interesting. Before Evelyn could formulate a response, a bell rang and Mr. Peterson called for everyone's attention. All right, folks, time to raise this frame. Everyone who's not on the crew, step back to a safe distance. The afternoon became a display of coordinated effort that Evelyn found fascinating. The men worked together with practiced efficiency, raising beams and securing them while someone called out directions. There was something almost beautiful about it, all these individuals working toward a common goal, each person knowing their role, trusting the others to do theirs. She found her gaze drifting back to Silas Reed again and again. He seemed to be everywhere at once, steadying a beam here, adjusting a joint there, helping a younger man figure out a difficult angle. And people listened when he spoke, respected his judgment. A natural leader, she thought, the kind of man people follow not because they have to, but because they want to. Careful there. A shout drew everyone's attention to a beam that was starting to slip. Several men rushed to stabilize it, including Silas, who grabbed hold and braced his weight against it until others could secure the joints. For a moment, the situation looked precarious. If that beam fell, someone could be seriously hurt. But Silas's voice cut through the confusion, calm and clear. Easy now. Tom, get your rope around that end. Billy, shore up the left joint, nice and steady. The men followed his instructions, and within moments, the crisis was resolved. The beam was secured, everyone was safe, and work continued. Evelyn realized her heart was pounding, though whether from the brief moment of danger or from watching Silas handle it with such composure, she couldn't say. By late afternoon, the barn frame stood complete, and everyone gathered for the feast. Long tables had been set up under the cottonwood trees, laden with food, roasted meats, vegetables, pies, cakes, fresh bread. It was a bounty that would have graced any Boston table, though the presentation was simpler, more rustic. Evelyn found herself seated between Beatrice and Mrs. Peterson, fielding questions about Boston and her plans for the school. She answered as best she could, trying to strike a balance between being informative and not revealing too much. "Did you come west for adventure, dear?" Mrs. Peterson asked. "That's usually why young ladies travel this far." "I came to make a fresh start," Evelyn said carefully, "and to be near family." "Well, we're glad to have you. Lord knows these children need proper education. My youngest, Samuel, can barely spell his own name." After the meal, someone produced a fiddle, and soon music filled the evening air. Several couples began dancing on a cleared area near the barn. Evelyn watched from a safe distance, content to observe rather than participate. "May I have this dance, Miss Hartwell?" She turned to find Silas Reed standing beside her, his hat in his hands, his expression polite but hopeful. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to maintain her distance, to keep her walls intact. But she could feel Beatrice watching, could sense the curious eyes of others in the community. Refusing would be rude, would mark her as standoffish. And besides, it was just a dance, nothing more. "All right," she heard herself say. His hand was warm and calloused as he led her to the dancing area. He placed his other hand respectfully at her waist, high enough to be proper, firm enough to guide her. The fiddle struck up a simple waltz, and they began to move. "I'm a bit rusty," he admitted. "Don't dance much these days." "You're doing fine." And he was. His lead was clear without being controlling, his rhythm steady. But what surprised her was the gentleness of it, the way he seemed aware of her tension, giving her space even while holding her, letting her adjust to the movement. How are you finding Willow Creek so far, Mace? He asked. It's very different from Boston. I imagine so. Do you miss it? Not as much as I expected to. The honesty surprised her. That's good. Means you made the right choice in coming here. He guided her through a turn. What made you decide to teach out west? Because my life in Boston became unbearable. Because I was betrayed by the man I thought I'd marry. Because I needed to run as far as possible from the whispers and the shame. I wanted a new challenge, she said instead. The opportunity to make a real difference in children's lives. That's admirable. His gray-blue eyes studied her face. Some people come west running from something. Others come west running towards something. Sounds like you're a bit of both. The observation was uncomfortably perceptive. Evelyn looked away, focusing on the other dancers. I didn't mean to pry, he said quietly. We've all got our reasons for the choices we make. Out here, folks generally respect that. Thank you. They danced in silence for a moment. Then Silas said, Your cousin mentioned you play the pianoforte. That true? Yes, though I'm out of practice. There's a piano at the church. Reverend Thompson would probably let you use it if you asked. Might be nice for you, having that piece of home. The thoughtfulness of the suggestion caught her off guard. That's very kind of you to think of. Not kind, just practical. Everyone needs something familiar when everything else is new. The song ended and they stepped apart. Silas returned his hat to his head and nodded politely. Thank you for the dance, Miss Hartwell. I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you, Mr. Reed. She watched him walk away, heading toward a group of men by the barn. Several clapped him on the shoulder, clearly ribbing him about something, probably dancing with the new schoolteacher. He took it with good-natured patience, neither embarrassed nor defensive. Well? Beatrice appeared at her elbow again, practically vibrating with curiosity. How was it? It was a dance, Bea, nothing more. He looked at me like a polite gentleman dancing with a new acquaintance, that's all. Evelyn kept her voice firm. I'm not interested in romance. I made that very clear before I came here. I know, but Evie... Beatrice lowered her voice. You're 26 years old. You can't let one bad experience close you off forever. One bad experience? Evelyn laughed without humor. Bea, I was engaged to a man who planned to steal my inheritance and laughed about how easy I was to fool. That's not just a bad experience. That's a fundamental betrayal of trust. Charles Whitmore is a scoundrel who doesn't deserve another moment of your thoughts, but Silas Reed is nothing like him. You're right. He's nothing like Charles, because unlike Charles, he's not interested in me beyond basic politeness, and I'm not interested in him beyond basic acquaintance. We're both perfectly content with that arrangement. Beatrice sighed, but didn't argue further. All right, I'll drop it, but promise me you'll at least keep an open mind, not about Silas specifically, just in general, about the possibility of eventually, someday, maybe letting someone in again. Someday, Evelyn said vaguely. Maybe. Eventually. It was the best she could offer, and Beatrice seemed to accept it. As the sun set and lanterns were lit around the yard, Evelyn found a quiet spot away from the crowd and looked out over the darkening prairie. The vastness still unsettled her, that endless expanse of sky and grass with no buildings to break it up, no walls to contain it. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that's what she needed. Space, freedom, room to breathe and rebuild herself without the suffocating pressure of society's expectations. Monday would bring her first day as a teacher, a new beginning, a chance to prove that she was more than just a jilted fiancé, more than just Boston gossip. She could do this. She would do this. And as for Silas Reed, well, he was simply a kind neighbor who danced with her out of politeness. Nothing more. She'd make sure of it. Even if part of her, the part she was trying very hard to ignore, had felt safer in his arms than she'd felt anywhere in months. Even if his observation that she was running both from something and toward something had been uncomfortably accurate. Even if she'd noticed the way he'd stepped up during that moment of danger at the barn, calm and capable, and exactly the kind of steady presence that... Stop. She was not doing this. She was not reading meaning into casual kindness. She was not looking for rescue or romance or any of the pretty lies that had destroyed her once before. She was here to teach, to rebuild, to prove to herself that she could stand on her own. That was enough. It had to be enough. The schoolhouse smelled of chalk dust and old wood when Evelyn arrived Monday morning, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocked the door. She'd barely slept the night before, her mind racing through lesson plans and imagined scenarios. Children who wouldn't listen, parents who'd complain, her own inadequacy exposed for everyone to see. But as the first students began trickling in, shy and curious, something settled in her chest. These were just children. Children who needed guidance, patience, and someone who believed in them. By noon, she'd learned all 23 names, assessed their varying skill levels, and established clear expectations. Some could barely read. Others were working through advanced primers. The age range stretched from 6-year-old Lily Peterson, who could recite her alphabet but little else, to 14-year-old Thomas Kowalski, who'd been helping his father on the farm so much that his education had become sporadic at best. "Miss Hartwell." A small voice interrupted her thoughts during the lunch break. She looked up to find a dark-haired boy standing by her desk, his cap twisted nervously in his hands. "Yes?" "I'm Noah Carson, ma'am. Mr. Reed, my Uncle Silas, he said I should introduce myself proper." Evelyn smiled despite herself. So this was the nephew Silas had mentioned. The boy had his uncle's gray-blue eyes and the same careful way of standing, as if he was always prepared to move quickly if needed. "It's very nice to meet you, Noah. How are you finding the lessons so far?" "They're good, ma'am. Better than with Miss Aldrich. I mean, she was nice and all, but she didn't explain things as clear as you do." He shifted his weight. "Uncle Silas says education's important. Says it's what separates opportunity from limitation." "Your uncle sounds like a wise man." "Yes'm. He reads a lot. Got a whole shelf of books at the ranch. Sometimes he reads to me in the evenings, when the work's done." Noah's face brightened. "Do you like books, Miss Hartwell?" "I love books. What does your uncle read to you?" "All kinds of things. Last month we finished Treasure Island. Before that, some poetry. Walt Whitman, I think. And he's teaching me about the stars, using an astronomy book that belonged to his wife." The mention of Silas's late wife sent an unexpected pang through Evelyn's chest. She pushed it aside. "That sounds wonderful, Noah. You're very fortunate to have an uncle who values learning." "I know, ma'am." He hesitated. "Uncle Silas wanted me to tell you, if you ever need anything for the school, supplies or repairs or anything, he said to let him know. He's handy with tools, and he doesn't mind helping." "That's very generous. Please thank him for me." After Noah returned to the schoolyard to play with the other children, Evelyn found herself thinking about Silas Reed again, a rancher who read Walt Whitman and studied astronomy, who made sure his nephew understood the value of education, who offered help to a school he had no obligation to support. She remembered Beatrice's words, "Good man. Everyone says so." But Charles had seemed like a good man too, at first. Charming, attentive, interested in her thoughts and opinions. It wasn't until she'd overheard that devastating conversation that she'd understood it had all been performance, manipulation designed to secure her fortune. How could she ever trust her judgment again? The afternoon lessons proceeded smoothly until Thomas Kowalski struggled with a long division problem at the board. His face reddened as he erased and rewrote numbers, aware that the younger children were watching. "Take your time, Thomas," Evelyn said gently. "Walk through it step by step." "I can't, Miss Hartwell. I'm too dumb for this." "You're not dumb. You simply haven't had consistent practice." She moved to stand beside him. "Let's work through it together. What's the first step?" Slowly, patiently, she guided him through the problem. When he finally arrived at the correct answer, his face lit up with surprise and pride. "I did it!" "Yes, you did. And you'll find that with practice, it becomes easier each time." She addressed the whole class. "Remember, making mistakes is how we learn. There's no shame in struggling with something new." As she spoke, she realized she was talking to herself as much as to the children. Wasn't that what she was doing here, struggling with something new, trying to learn from her mistakes, attempting to rebuild herself? The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Teaching consumed most of her energy, which was exactly what she needed. She threw herself into lesson planning, into finding creative ways to engage students with different abilities, into building relationships with the families whose children sat in her classroom. She visited the church twice a week to practice on the piano, as Silas had suggested. Reverend Thompson had been delighted to grant her access, and those hours at the keyboard became a kind of meditation, her fingers finding familiar patterns, her mind quieting as music filled the empty sanctuary. She saw Silas occasionally in town, always from a distance. He'd nod politely if their eyes met, but he never approached, never sought conversation beyond basic pleasantries. She told herself she was grateful for this. It meant she'd been right. His attention at the barn raising had been simple, neighborly courtesy, nothing more. She definitely didn't feel disappointed. One afternoon in late June, Noah stayed after school to help her organize some new primers that had arrived from Cheyenne. The boy was a natural helper, careful and thorough, and they worked in companionable silence for a while before he spoke. "Miss Hartwell, can I ask you something?" "Of course, Noah." "Why did you leave Boston? Uncle Silas says folks don't usually come this far west without a good reason." Evelyn's hand stilled on the books. She should have expected this question eventually. Children were naturally curious, and Noah was brighter than most. "I wanted a fresh start," she said carefully. "Sometimes people need to begin again somewhere new." "Did something bad happen?" She looked at him, this earnest 8-year-old with his uncle's perceptive eyes, and decided he deserved honesty, if not details. "Yes, Noah. Something bad happened. Something that made me very sad. So I came here to heal and to do work that matters." He considered this gravely. "Is it working? The healing part?" "It's getting better, slowly." "That's good." He returned to stacking books. Uncle Silas was real sad after Aunt Caroline died. He didn't smile for a long time, but he's better now too, still quiet, but better. "I'm glad to hear that. He says time doesn't heal everything, but it helps you carry things easier." Noah glanced at her. "Is that true?" "I think so, yes." "Good, 'cause I like having you as my teacher, Miss Hartwell. I'd be sad if you were too sad to stay." The simple childlike logic of it made something crack in Evelyn's carefully maintained composure. She blinked rapidly against sudden tears. "Thank you, Noah. That means a great deal to me." When Silas arrived to collect his nephew that evening, riding up on a handsome bay gelding, his hat pulled low against the setting sun, Noah ran out to greet him with his usual enthusiasm. "Uncle Silas, Miss Hartwell let me help organize all the new books, and I finished my arithmetic problems with no mistakes." "That's fine work, Noah. I'm proud of you." Silas's gaze moved to Evelyn, who'd followed Noah outside. He touched his hat brim. "Miss Hartwell, hope he wasn't any trouble." "None at all. He's a wonderful student." "He's a good boy." There was unmistakable affection in Silas's voice. "You ready, Noah? We've got evening chores waiting." "Yes, sir." Noah turned to Evelyn. "See you tomorrow, Miss Hartwell." She watched them ride off together, Noah chattering away while Silas listened with patient attention. There was something deeply appealing about the relationship between them, the way Silas clearly prioritized his nephew, the way Noah obviously adored his uncle. "Stop romanticizing," she scolded herself. "You're projecting what you want to see, just like you did with Charles." But even as she thought this, she knew it was different. Charles's charm had been calculated, performed. There was nothing calculated about the way Silas listened to his nephew, or the quiet pride in his voice when he praised the boy's work. Still, better to maintain her distance, safer that way. The 4th of July brought a town celebration, a picnic, games, and evening fireworks courtesy of Mr. Chen, who'd somehow procured them from San Francisco. Beatrice insisted that Evelyn attend. "You've been working yourself to exhaustion," she said firmly. "You need a break, and the town expects their school teacher to participate in community events." So Evelyn found herself at the town square that afternoon, wearing a white dress with blue ribbons that Beatrice had deemed appropriately patriotic. Children ran everywhere, high on sugar and excitement. Adults gathered in clusters, talking and laughing. Someone had organized a baseball game in the field beyond the church. "Miss Hartwell," Lily Peterson came running up, her blonde braids flying. "Will you judge the pie contest, please? Mrs. Chen said you'd be fair 'cause you're a teacher." Before Evelyn could respond, she was swept into judging duties alongside Doc Henderson and Sheriff Dalton. The three of them sampled apple, cherry, rhubarb, and berry pies while the assembled crowd watched with interest. This is more pressure than delivering babies, Doc Henderson muttered after his fifth slice. Everyone's got an opinion about pies. Despite herself, Evelyn laughed. She was making notes about crust texture when she became aware of someone standing nearby. She looked up to find Silas Reed watching her with an expression that might have been amusement. Afternoon, Miss Hartwell. I see you've been drafted into service. Apparently teaching qualifies me to judge pastries. Well, you're handling it with more diplomacy than last year's judge. Mrs. Peterson still hasn't forgiven Reverend Thompson for ranking her apple pie third. Which pie is hers? The one with the lattice crust, second from the left. Evelyn looked at the pie in question, then back at Silas. And why are you telling me this? Just passing along information. What you do with it is your business. The corner of his mouth quirked upward. Though I will mention that Mrs. Peterson has 8 children in your school, and she's on the board that determines your salary. Mr. Reed, are you suggesting I allow politics to influence my judgment? I'm suggesting that sometimes discretion is the better part of valor. Besides, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. Between you and me, her pie really is the best. I've been eating it for 10 years. He was close enough that she could smell saddle leather and sage and something else, something warm and distinctly him. Close enough that she could see gold flecks in his gray-blue eyes, could see the fine lines that suggested he smiled more than his serious demeanor indicated. Her heart did something complicated in her chest. I'll take your expert opinion under advisement, she managed. Appreciated. He straightened, tipping his hat. Enjoy the rest of the judging, Miss Hartwell. She watched him walk away, that easy, ground-covering stride, and tried to ignore the way her pulse had accelerated from such a brief interaction. Mrs. Peterson's pie did indeed win first place, though Evelyn consoled herself that it genuinely was the best. The crust was perfectly flaky, the filling was balanced between sweet and tart, and the lattice work showed real skill. The fact that it also happened to be politically expedient was merely coincidental. As evening fell and families spread blankets for the fireworks display, Beatrice found her. Come sit with us. James has claimed a good spot. They settled on the Monroe's quilt, and Evelyn found herself relaxing into the community atmosphere. Children chased fireflies. Someone started playing a guitar. The air smelled of smoke and grass and summer warmth. The first firework exploded overhead in a cascade of red and gold, and the crowd gasped in unison. More followed, blues and greens and brilliant whites that lit up the night sky. Evelyn tilted her head back, watching the display with something approaching wonder. She'd seen fireworks in Boston, of course, elaborate displays over the harbor, accompanied by military bands and formal celebrations. But this felt different, more intimate, more genuine. These people had pooled their resources to create something beautiful for their community, not because it was expected or required, but simply because they wanted to. Beautiful, isn't it? Beatrice whispered. Yes, it really is. A particularly loud explosion made several children shriek with delighted terror. Evelyn smiled, watching their excitement, and for the first time since leaving Boston, she felt something unfamiliar settling in her chest. Contentment. Maybe even happiness. It wouldn't last, she knew that. Good feelings never did. But for this moment, watching fireworks in a frontier town 3,000 miles from her former life, she felt almost whole. The next morning, she woke to pounding on the Monroe's front door. She heard James stumble downstairs, heard voices, urgent, worried. Then Beatrice was in her doorway. Evie, get dressed. There's been an accident. Her heart lurched. What kind of accident? A fire at the Kowalski farm. The barn went up last night. Mr. Kowalski got the animals out, but he's got bad burns. Doc Henderson is asking if you can take the children for a few days, while Mrs. Kowalski helps her husband recover. Of course. How many children? 6. The oldest is Thomas. You know him from school. The youngest is 3. Within an hour, Evelyn found herself in charge of 6 traumatized children who'd just watched their family's barn burn down. The house was chaos, the younger ones crying, the older ones trying to be brave but clearly shaken. Mrs. Kowalski was torn between staying with her injured husband and caring for her children. Go be with your husband, Evelyn said firmly. The children will be fine with me. We'll manage. But Miss Hartwell, you don't... I mean, you're not... Mrs. Kowalski's voice cracked. I can't ask you to... You're not asking. I'm offering. Go. After Mrs. Kowalski left for the doctor's office, Evelyn surveyed her charges. Thomas, 14, trying to be strong. Anna, 12, comforting the younger ones. Margaret, 10. Joseph, 8. Little Samuel, 6. And tiny Helena, just 3, who hadn't stopped crying since her mother left. She had no experience with children this young, no training in managing crisis situations. But she was here, and they needed someone. All right, she said, making her voice calm and confident. Here's what we're going to do. Thomas, you and I will make breakfast. Anna, you'll help the little ones wash up. Margaret, you'll set the table. Everyone has a job, and we're going to work together. Can you do that? They nodded, grateful for direction, for structure in the midst of chaos. The next 3 days were simultaneously the longest and shortest of Evelyn's life. She cooked meals she'd never prepared before, changed diapers she'd never imagined having to touch, told stories to calm nightmares, and held sobbing children who were terrified their father might die. She also received help from unexpected quarters. The second morning, Beatrice arrived with supplies: extra blankets, children's clothes, toys. Mrs. Peterson brought a pot of stew large enough to feed an army. Mrs. Chen appeared with laundry soap and offered to take the washing. And Silas Reed showed up with Noah, a wagon full of lumber, and a quiet offer. Heard you've got your hands full, he said, standing on the Munro's porch with his hat in his hands. Figured I'd bring Noah to visit with the Kowalski kids. Might help take their minds off things. And if you need any repairs done around here, I've got time. That's very kind, but not kind. Practical. You're taking care of 6 children when you don't have to. Least I can do is make sure the porch rail that's been wobbling doesn't give way under the weight of all those young ones. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing but sincere concern. No hidden motives, no expectations, just a man offering help because help was needed. Thank you, Mr. Reed. I appreciate it. While the children played in the backyard under Anna's watchful supervision, Silas worked on various small repairs around the house. The loose porch rail, a squeaky door hinge, a window that wouldn't open properly. Evelyn tried to focus on preparing lunch, but she kept finding her attention drawn to the window, watching him work. He moved with the same careful efficiency she'd noticed at the barn raising, never wasting motion, always focused on the task at hand. But there was something almost meditative about it, too. The way he tested each repair, made minute adjustments, didn't stop until it was exactly right. Around noon, she brought him water and a sandwich. You didn't have to do that, he said, but he accepted both gratefully. You didn't have to spend your morning fixing Beatrice's house, but here we are. A smile flickered across his face. Fair point. He took a long drink. How's Mr. Kowalski doing? Doc Henderson says he'll recover, but it'll take time. The burns on his hands and arms are severe. Silas nodded slowly. Fire's a real danger out here. We all know it, but knowing doesn't always prevent it. He looked toward the backyard where the children's laughter could be heard. Those kids are lucky to have you stepping in. Not everyone would. Anyone would help in a situation like this? You'd be surprised. Some folks talk a good game about community, but when it comes down to actual sacrifice, time, comfort, convenience, they find reasons to be elsewhere. He met her eyes. You're here. That says something about your character. The compliment made her uncomfortable. She wasn't doing anything special, just what needed to be done. The children needed someone. And you didn't hesitate. Like I said, says something. That evening, after the children were finally asleep, the younger ones in Beatrice's spare room, the older ones in the parlor on borrowed bedrolls, Evelyn sat on the porch steps, exhausted and overwhelmed. She heard footsteps and looked up to find Silas returning from putting his tools in the wagon. She'd thought he'd left already. Didn't mean to startle you, he said. Just wanted to make sure everything was secure before I headed back to the ranch. Everything's fine. Thank you for your help today. Instead of leaving, he sat down on the steps a respectful distance away, his long legs stretched out in front of him. For a moment they sat in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the western sky. You look tired, he observed. I am, but it's a good kind of tired, the kind that comes from doing something that matters. That's the best kind. He paused. Can I ask you something? Her shoulders tensed automatically. All right. Why teaching? With your education, your background, you could have done anything. Why come all the way out here to teach frontier children? It was a fair question, and somehow, sitting there in the twilight with this quiet man who'd spent his day helping without asking for anything in return, she found herself answering honestly. Because children don't lie about what they need. They don't pretend or manipulate. If they don't understand something, they say so. If they're grateful, it shows. There's a purity to it that She stopped, realizing she was revealing too much. That you needed, Silas finished quietly. After dealing with people who weren't pure in their intentions. She looked at him sharply. What makes you say that? Just a guess. You've got that look about you, like someone who's been hurt and is figuring out how to trust again. His voice was gentle, not prying. I recognize it because I see it in the mirror sometimes. Your wife, Caroline. Yeah. He was quiet for a moment. 4 years, and I still expect to see her sometimes. To hear her laugh, to smell her baking. Grief's a strange thing. It changes shape, but never really leaves. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you. And I'm sorry for whatever happened to you in Boston. How did you know it was in Boston? Noah mentioned it. He didn't mean anything by it, just said you'd come from there to make a fresh start. Silas looked at her steadily. I'm not asking for details. Your business is your own. I just want you to know that whatever you're running from, you don't have to explain it. Not to me, not to anyone. Out here, we judge people by who they are now, not who they were. Something about those words, the permission they granted, the acceptance they offered, made Evelyn's throat tight. Thank you, she whispered. Nothing to thank me for, just stating facts. He stood, settling his hat back on his head. You should get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be another long day. Mr. Reed? He turned back. Why do you do it? Help people, I mean. You spent your whole day here and you barely know me. He considered the question seriously. Because somebody did it for me once. When Caroline died, I couldn't function. Couldn't think, couldn't plan, couldn't see past the grief. The community here, they took care of everything. Fed me, ran the ranch, made sure I didn't fall apart completely. I learned something important during that time. What? That strength isn't about standing alone. It's about knowing when to accept help and when to offer it. We're all struggling with something. Might as well struggle together. After he left, Evelyn sat on those steps for a long time, thinking about his words, about the community that had supported him through grief, about the way he'd extended that same support to her without hesitation, about the fact that she hadn't felt afraid or guarded around him today. She just felt seen, when to accept help and when to offer it. We're all struggling with something. Might as well struggle together. After he left, Evelyn sat on those steps for a long time, thinking about his words, about the community that had supported him through grief, about the way he'd extended that same support to her without hesitation, about the fact that she hadn't felt afraid or guarded around him today. She just felt seen. When Mr. Kowalski was well enough to leave Doc Henderson's care, and Mrs. Kowalski had her children back home, the gratitude was overwhelming. Thomas shook Evelyn's hand formally, promising to work extra hard in school. Mrs. Kowalski cried and tried to give her a preserves as payment, which Evelyn refused. You being okay is payment enough, she said. Just focus on healing. But word of what she'd done spread through Willow Creek with surprising speed. Parents who'd been cautiously evaluating the new teacher now greeted her with warmth. Invitations began arriving, for Sunday dinners, for quilting circles, for social gatherings she would have dreaded a month ago. She accepted some and politely declined others, finding a balance between community involvement and personal space. The summer heat intensified as July gave way to August. School recessed for harvest season, and Evelyn found herself with unexpected free time. She spent mornings practicing piano at the church, afternoons reading in Beatrice's garden, and evenings taking long walks through town. It was during one of these walks that she quite literally collided with Silas Reed. She'd been looking at the sunset, not watching where she was going, and walked straight into his solid chest. His hand steadied her automatically, catching her shoulders before she could stumble backward. Whoa there, Miss Hartwell. Careful. I'm so sorry, I wasn't paying attention. She looked up and found his face much closer than she'd expected, his hands still on her shoulders, his eyes holding hers with an expression she couldn't quite read. For a breathless moment, neither of them moved. Then Silas released her carefully, stepping back to a proper distance. No harm done, though you might want to watch where you're walking. Streets aren't as smooth as Boston's sidewalks. Yes. Right. Of course. She felt flustered, off balance, and not just from the near fall. You all right? His voice had gentled. You look a bit shaken. I'm fine. Just embarrassed. Don't be. I've run into more fence posts than I care to admit when my mind's elsewhere. He tilted his head slightly. What were you thinking about so hard? The sunset. How different the colors are here compared to Boston. Better or worse? Just different. More... She searched for the right word. Dramatic, I suppose. Everything feels bigger here. The sky, the landscape, even the weather. That's Wyoming for you. Nothing subtle about it. He glanced at the sky she'd been admiring. Caroline used to say the sunsets here were God's way of apologizing for the harsh winters. It was the first time she'd heard him mention his wife unprompted. Evelyn felt honored by the confidence, however small. That's a lovely way to think about it. She had a gift for finding beauty in hard things. His expression turned distant. I miss that about her. They walked together in comfortable silence for a block before Silas spoke again. Noah tells me you've been working on mathematics with him during piano practice. He mentioned he was struggling with fractions. I offered to help. You don't have to do that on your own time. I don't mind. He's bright and motivated. It's a pleasure to teach him. Still, it's kind of you. They'd reached the church, where Silas had apparently been heading. I've got to meet with Reverend Thompson about the fall harvest donations. But Miss Hartwell, thank you. For everything you do, not just for Noah, but for all the children. It makes a difference. Thank you for saying so. She watched him disappear into the church, feeling that same strange flutter in her chest that seemed to appear whenever he was around. It's just gratitude, she told herself firmly. He's Noah's uncle, concerned about his education. Nothing more. But that night, lying in bed and listening to crickets singing in the garden, she couldn't stop thinking about the moment when his hands had steadied her, the warmth of his palms through her dress sleeves, the concern in his eyes, the way he'd looked at her like she mattered. No, she was not doing this. She rolled over, punching her pillow into a more comfortable shape, and firmly redirected her thoughts to lesson planning for the fall term. But sleep was a long time coming, and when it finally arrived, she dreamed of gray-blue eyes and strong hands and a voice saying, "Strength isn't about standing alone." The end of August brought a surprise, a letter from Boston, from her mother. Eveline's hands trembled as she opened it, unsure what to expect. Recriminations? Pleas to return? More news of the social disaster she'd left behind? Dearest Evelyn, your father and I miss you terribly, but we understand why you felt you had to leave. Boston has not been kind in your absence. The gossip continues, though it has lessened somewhat as newer scandals have captured society's attention. I write to tell you that Charles Whitmore's true nature has finally been exposed. His creditors have taken him to court, and the full extent of his debts and deceits has become public knowledge. Several other young ladies have come forward with stories of his manipulation. The Whitmore family is ruined, and Charles has fled to Europe to escape his obligations. I know this news brings little comfort. The damage to your own reputation remains. But at least the truth is known now. Several of your former friends have expressed regret at how they treated you. Mrs. Alderson in particular wished me to convey her apologies on behalf of Margaret. Your father asked that I remind you that you always have a home here, should you wish to return. We love you and want only your happiness. Your affectionate mother Eveline read the letter 3 times, trying to process her emotions. Vindication, certainly. Relief that Charles's character had been exposed, but also nothing. The news that should have mattered intensely felt distant, irrelevant. Boston was someone else's life. That naive girl who'd believed Charles's lies felt like a different person entirely. Bad news? Beatrice asked, noticing her expression. Actually, it's supposed to be good news. Charles has been exposed as a fraud. My reputation is theoretically restored. That's wonderful, isn't it? I suppose. But B, Evelyn looked at her cousin. I don't care anymore. Not the way I thought I would. Boston, my reputation, all of it. It feels like it happened to someone else. That's because you've built a new life here. A better life. Maybe. Evelyn folded the letter carefully. Mother says I can come home if I want, that several people have apologized. Beatrice's face fell. Are you going to? No. The word came without hesitation, and Evelyn realized she meant it absolutely. No, I'm not. This is home now. These are my students, my community. I don't want to go back to being that person I was in Boston. Relief flooded Beatrice's features. I'm so glad. Selfishly glad, I admit, but glad nonetheless. That evening, Evelyn wrote a response to her mother, kind but firm, explaining that she was happy in Willow Creek, that she'd found purpose in teaching, that she wouldn't be returning to Boston except perhaps for visits. As she sealed the letter, she felt something release in her chest. A weight she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. She was free, truly free. Not running anymore, but choosing, building, growing. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. September arrived with cooler temperatures and changing leaves, and school resumed. Evelyn threw herself into the new term with renewed energy. She'd learned from her first months which students needed extra encouragement, which responded to challenges, which had difficult home situations that affected their learning. Noah Carson continued to excel, his natural intelligence flowering under consistent guidance. Thomas Kowalski worked hard to make up for lost time. Lily Peterson's reading improved dramatically. Even shy little Samuel found his voice during oral recitations. But it was during a Sunday afternoon in late September that everything changed. Evelyn had been invited to the Reed Ranch for a community picnic, several families gathering to celebrate the successful harvest. She'd initially planned to decline, but Beatrice had insisted, and she found herself sitting in the Monroe's wagon, heading north into ranch country. The Double R was larger than she'd expected, a sprawling operation with cattle grazing across rolling hills, a sturdy ranch house with a wide porch, and various outbuildings all in good repair. Everything spoke of careful management and steady prosperity. Silas greeted the arriving families with quiet hospitality, directing wagons to shaded parking areas and helping ladies down with courteous efficiency. When he reached the Monroe wagon, his eyes found Evelyn immediately. Miss Hartwell, glad you could come. Thank you for including me. His hand closed around hers as he helped her down, and she was acutely aware of the calluses, the strength, the careful gentleness. He held on a moment longer than necessary, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in what might have been accident or might have been intention. Come on, he said, releasing her. I'll show you around before things get too busy. They walked through his property, past the barn where horses nickered curiously, past the chicken coop where hens scratched in the dust, down to a creek that ran through the property with cottonwoods providing shade along its banks. This is beautiful, Evelyn said honestly. You've built something remarkable here. Caroline and I built it together. After she died, I thought about selling, moving away. Too many memories. He picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across the water. But memories aren't always painful. Sometimes they're just company. That's a healthier way of looking at it than I've managed. He glanced at her. Your hurt's newer than mine. Give it time. Everyone keeps telling me that. Time heals, time helps, time changes things. They're right, but it's not passive. Time alone doesn't do anything. You have to actively work at healing, have to choose to keep living, keep trying, keep opening yourself to possibility. He skipped another stone. That's the hard part. Evelyn watched the ripples spread across the water. How did you do it? Choose to keep living after such a loss? Noah helped. Having someone who needed me, who reminded me that life continued whether I participated or not. His voice softened. And eventually, I realized Caroline wouldn't have wanted me to stop living just because she couldn't. She'd have been furious if I'd wasted the time she didn't get. The honesty of it pierced something in Evelyn's chest. This man understood grief, understood betrayal and loss and the slow work of rebuilding. And he was still here, still functioning, still finding meaning. Maybe healing really was possible. Thank you, she said quietly, for sharing that. Thank you for listening. He turned to face her fully. Can I tell you something, Miss Hartwell? Her heart kicked. Yes. You're different than when you first arrived. Stronger, more present. Whatever work you've been doing, keep at it. It's paying off. The compliment caught her completely off guard. She'd been so focused on just surviving, on getting through each day, that she hadn't noticed her own progress. But he had noticed. He'd been paying attention. Thank you. That means more than you know. Good. He smiled then, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his whole face. Now we should probably head back before Beatrice sends a search party. She's got that look that says she's plotting something. They walked back toward the gathering, and Evelyn felt the weight of curious eyes watching them. Mrs. Peterson whispered something to Mrs. Chen. Beatrice looked positively triumphant. Let them speculate. For once, Evelyn didn't care about gossip or appearances. She'd just spent 20 minutes in genuine conversation with a man who saw her clearly and still treated her with respect. That was worth any amount of whispered speculation. The picnic that afternoon unfolded with the easy rhythm of frontier hospitality, long tables groaning under platters of food, children racing through the grass while their parents watched with indulgent smiles, men discussing cattle prices and weather patterns while women traded recipes and news. Evelyn found herself drawn into conversations that felt natural rather than performative, welcomed into a community that had decided she belonged. But she was always aware of Silas. The way he moved through his guests with quiet attentiveness, making sure everyone had what they needed. The way he listened when people spoke to him, giving them his full attention rather than scanning the crowd for someone more important. The way his gaze found her periodically, as if checking that she was comfortable, that she wasn't overwhelmed. It should have made her nervous, that attention. Instead, it made her feel protected. You're staring, Beatrice murmured, appearing at her elbow with a plate of apple cobbler. I am not. You absolutely are, and he's been watching you just as much, so don't think you're alone in it. Beatrice handed her the plate. Eat this and stop looking so conflicted about a good man paying you attention. I can't. Can't what? Can't allow yourself to feel something? Can't imagine that maybe, possibly, there's a man in this world who might actually be worthy of your trust? Beatrice's voice gentled. I know Charles hurt you terribly, but Silas Reed isn't Charles Whitmore, not even remotely. How can I know that? How can I ever trust my judgment again when it failed me so completely before? Because you're not that naive girl anymore, Evie. You've learned, you've grown, you've become more careful and more wise. And sometimes, Beatrice squeezed her hand, sometimes you have to take a leap of faith, not blindly, but with your eyes open, watching for the signs you missed before. Before Evelyn could respond, Noah came running up, breathless with excitement. Miss Hartwell, Uncle Silas says we're going to play rounders. Will you be on my team, please? She couldn't help but smile at his enthusiasm. I don't know how to play rounders, Noah. It's easy. Uncle Silas will teach you. Come on. He grabbed her hand and tugged her toward the field where someone had set up bases. Silas stood at home plate with a bat, demonstrating proper form to a cluster of children. All right, he was saying, the key is to watch the ball all the way to the bat. Don't swing wild, wait for your pitch. Uncle Silas, Noah called. Miss Hartwell's going to play, but she doesn't know how. Silas turned and something warm flickered in his eyes when he saw her. Well then, we'd better teach her. Miss Hartwell, ever held a bat before? I can't say that I have, Mr. Reed. Nothing to it. He walked over and offered her the bat. Here, feel the weight of it. She took it gingerly, surprised by how heavy it was. Silas moved behind her, his hands covering hers on the bat, adjusting her grip. Feet shoulder-width apart, he said quietly, his voice close to her ear. Knees slightly bent. Keep your eye on the ball, and when you swing, follow through completely. She was acutely aware of his presence behind her, the solid warmth of him, the way his hands guided hers with patient confidence. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she was certain he must be able to feel it. Like this? She attempted a practice swing. Almost. Here. His hands adjusted her stance, his touch professional but lingering just a moment longer than strictly necessary. Now try again. This time the swing felt more natural, more powerful. She heard his quiet sound of approval. That's it. You're a natural. He stepped back and she immediately felt the loss of his warmth. Ridiculous, she told herself. Absolutely ridiculous to feel bereft because a man stopped teaching you how to hold a bat. The game proceeded with chaotic enthusiasm. Evelyn struck out her first 2 times at bat, but on her 3rd attempt she connected solidly with the ball. It sailed over the second baseman's head, and Noah screamed with joy. "Run, Miss Hartwell! Run!" She ran, her skirts hampering her progress, laughter bubbling up as she rounded first base and headed for second. The ball was still being chased down in the outfield. Third base. Could she make it home? "Slide!" someone yelled. She had no idea how to slide, but she threw herself forward anyway, landing in an undignified heap just as the ball smacked into Silas's glove at home plate. "Safe," Reverend Thompson declared from his position as umpire. Silas stood over her grinning. That was the worst slide I've ever seen, but it worked. He extended his hand to help her up. She took it, and he pulled her to her feet with easy strength. For a moment they stood close, both breathing hard from exertion and laughter, his hand still holding hers. "You've got grass in your hair," he said softly. "I'm sure I look absolutely dignified." "You look happy." His thumb brushed across her knuckles again, that same gesture from earlier. "It's a good look on you." Someone whistled, one of the ranch hands probably, and Silas released her hand with obvious reluctance, stepping back to a more appropriate distance. But the moment had shifted something. Evelyn could feel it, could see it reflected in his eyes. The careful distance they'd both maintained was beginning to crack. And God help her, she wasn't sure she wanted to maintain it anymore. The sun was setting by the time families began packing up to leave. Silas helped load wagons, said goodbye to his guests, and walked the Monroe wagon out to the road personally. "Thank you for coming," he said, looking directly at Evelyn. "I hope you enjoyed yourself." "Very much. It was a lovely afternoon." "Good. I'm glad." He hesitated, as if weighing his next words carefully. "Miss Hartwell, I wonder if I might call on you sometime. Properly, I mean, not just crossing paths in town or at community events." Her breath caught. This was it. The moment where she had to decide whether to continue hiding behind her walls or take the risk Beatrice had challenged her to consider. She looked at him standing there in the fading light, this man who'd been nothing but patient and kind and genuine, who'd shown her by steady example what good character looked like, who asked permission rather than assuming, who respected boundaries rather than pushing. "I would like that," she heard herself say. His smile was slow and genuine. "Sunday afternoon? We could take a ride out to the canyon overlook if the weather holds. Noah's been wanting to show you. He talks about it constantly." "With Noah as chaperone?" "If that makes you more comfortable. Or Beatrice and James could come, whatever you prefer." The fact that he understood her need for propriety, for protection, for careful steps rather than reckless leaps, it meant everything. "Noah would be perfect," she said. "I'd enjoy spending time with him." "Sunday then. I'll collect you around 2:00? "I'll be ready." James clucked to the horses, and the wagon rolled forward. Evelyn looked back once to see Silas still standing there, watching them go, his figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. "Well," Beatrice said with poorly suppressed excitement, "that was interesting." "Don't start?" "I'm not starting anything. I'm just observing that a certain rancher just asked formal permission to court you, and you accepted. He asked to take me riding with his nephew present. That's hardly Evie." Beatrice turned to look at her directly. "That man is courting you, slowly, respectfully, but courting nonetheless. Are you really going to pretend you don't see it?" Evelyn was quiet for a long moment. "I see it," she finally admitted. "And B, I'm terrified." "I know, honey, but maybe that's okay. Maybe being terrified means it matters, that you're not just going through motions but actually feeling something real. What if I'm wrong about him? What if I'm just as blind now as I was with Charles?" "You're not. Trust me. Trust yourself. You're watching for red flags now. You're being careful. And importantly, Silas isn't showing any of the warning signs Charles did. He's not rushing you, not pressuring you, not trying to isolate you from family and friends. He's being honest and patient and giving you every opportunity to see exactly who he is." James cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, Silas Reed is about as solid as they come. Known him 5 years now, and he's never been anything but straight dealing and honorable. If I had a sister, I wouldn't hesitate to introduce them. See, Beatrice said triumphantly. Even James approves. I just hope I don't disappoint him when he realizes how broken I actually am. Oh, Evie, Beatrice's voice was thick with emotion. You're not broken. You're healing. There's a difference. That night, Evelyn lay awake long after the house had gone quiet, her mind replaying every moment of the day. The walk by the creek, the Rounders game, the way Silas had looked at her when he asked to call on her. She'd come to Wyoming determined never to trust a man again, never to open her heart to the possibility of hurt. But somehow, without her quite noticing, Silas Reed had begun dismantling those walls brick by careful brick. Not by force or manipulation, but simply by being himself. Steady, kind, present. She thought about what he'd said by the creek, that healing wasn't passive, that you had to actively choose to keep living and opening yourself to possibility. Maybe it was time to choose, not blindly, not recklessly, but with clear eyes and a cautious heart. Maybe it was time to see what happened when you let someone hold the pieces. Sunday arrived with perfect autumn weather, cool and clear, with golden leaves drifting from the cottonwoods and the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Evelyn changed her dress 3 times before Beatrice finally intervened. You look lovely. Stop fussing. I'm not fussing, I'm just fussing. Definitely fussing. Beatrice adjusted Evelyn's collar. It's just a ride with Silas and Noah. Nothing to be nervous about. I know. I just want to make a good impression. Honey, you've already made a good impression. That's why he asked to call on you. Beatrice stepped back, surveying her critically. Perfect. Now breathe and try to enjoy yourself. When Silas arrived at exactly 2 o'clock with Noah bouncing excitedly beside him in the wagon, Evelyn's heart did that complicated flutter again. He'd clearly made an effort. Clean shirt, hair neatly combed, his good hat instead of his work one. Miss Hartwell. He stepped down to help her into the wagon. You look beautiful. The compliment was simple and sincere, and it warmed her more than any of Charles's elaborate flattery ever had. Thank you, Mr. Reed. You look very nice as well. Noah chattered constantly as they drove out of town, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories about various adventures he'd had in the surrounding countryside. Silas listened with patient amusement, occasionally correcting exaggerations with gentle humor. And this one time, Noah said, Uncle Silas roped a calf that was twice as big as any calf ever, and it dragged him through the mud for a mile. It was a regular-sized calf, and I got dragged about 10 feet before I let go of the rope, Silas corrected mildly. But it was really muddy. That part's true. I looked like I'd been wallowing with the hogs. Evelyn laughed at the image. I'm having trouble picturing you covered in mud. Oh, it happens regularly. Ranching's not glamorous work. He glanced at her with a slight smile. Though I try to clean up presentable when taking ladies riding. The canyon overlook turned out to be a spectacular viewpoint where the land dropped away into a gorge carved by centuries of water flow. The colors were breathtaking, reds and golds and deep shadows where the sun didn't reach. They stood at the edge, Noah pointing out various features while Silas stood close enough that Evelyn could feel his warmth, but not so close as to be improper. It's magnificent, she breathed. One of my favorite places, Silas said quietly. I come here when I need to think. Something about seeing how small we are compared to all this, it puts problems in perspective. I can see why. It makes Boston's concerns seem very distant. Do you miss it? Boston? She considered the question honestly. I miss my parents, but the city itself, the social world I lived in? No, I don't miss that at all. I'm much happier here. I'm glad. We're lucky to have you. Noah had wandered off to examine some interesting rocks, giving them a few moments of relative privacy. Silas turned to face her more fully. Miss Hartwell. Evelyn, if I may. Her heart kicked at the use of her first name. Of course. And you should call me Evie. Everyone does. Evie. He said it like he was tasting the word. I wanted to say something, and I'm not entirely sure how to phrase it properly, so forgive me if I'm clumsy. Go ahead. I know you've been hurt. I don't know the details, and you don't have to tell me unless you want to. But I can see it in how careful you are. How you keep people at arm's length even while being kind to them. He took a slow breath. I want you to know that I'm not in any hurry. Whatever this is between us, this friendship, this possibility, we can take it as slow as you need. I'm not going to push or pressure or expect anything you're not ready to give. The words settled over her like a blanket, warm and protective. Why? She asked softly. Why are you being so patient? Because you're worth patience. And because, he looked out at the canyon, because I know what it's like to be broken. After Caroline died, I was shattered. Couldn't imagine ever feeling whole again. It took time and help and a lot of stubborn determination to piece myself back together. So I understand that healing can't be rushed. I'm not sure I can ever be what you deserve. What if I'm too damaged? He looked at her then, his gray-blue eyes serious and intent. Everyone's got damage, Evie. The question isn't whether you're broken. It's whether you're willing to try healing. And from what I've seen, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met. You left everything familiar, built a new life, threw yourself into work that matters. That's not damage. That's courage. She felt tears prickling at her eyes and blinked them back firmly. Thank you for saying that. I'm just telling the truth. He reached out slowly, telegraphing his intention, and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. You don't have to be perfect or completely healed. You just have to be willing to keep trying. That's all any of us can do. Uncle Silas! Noah came running back, arms full of colorful rocks. Look what I found. Can we take these back for Miss Hartwell's classroom? The moment broke, but the understanding remained. As they loaded Noah's rock collection into the wagon and began the drive back to town, Evelyn felt something shifting inside her. Not healed, not yet, but healing, opening, allowing possibility. Silas kept his word about moving slowly. Over the following weeks, his courtship was gentle and undemanding. He appeared at church on Sundays and sat with the Monroe family, his presence steady and unobtrusive. He brought supplies for the school when Evelyn mentioned they were running low on slate pencils. He invited her and the Monroes to the ranch for Sunday dinners, where the conversation flowed easily and the laughter came naturally. He never pushed for more than she seemed ready to give, never tried to monopolize her time or isolate her from her friends, never made promises or declarations that would have felt like pressure. He just showed up, consistently, patiently, genuinely. And slowly, carefully, Evelyn began to trust him. October brought the first frost and preparations for winter. School days grew shorter as darkness came earlier. Evelyn found herself looking forward to Sundays with an anticipation that both excited and frightened her. One Sunday afternoon, after dinner at the ranch, she and Silas took a walk while Noah helped Beatrice and James with the dishes. The air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves. Can I ask you something? Silas said after they'd walked in comfortable silence for a while. Of course. What happened in Boston? You don't have to tell me if you don't want to, but... He paused. I'd like to understand what made you so afraid of trusting people. Evelyn's first instinct was to deflect, to maintain the privacy she'd guarded so carefully. But she looked at this man who'd been nothing but honest with her, who'd shared his own grief and healing, and she realized he deserved the same honesty in return. So she told him everything about Charles and the engagement, about overhearing the conversation that shattered her illusions, about the twisted gossip that followed her broken engagement, about feeling suffocated by a society that judged her for being the victim rather than supporting her. Silas listened without interrupting, his expression growing progressively darker as the story unfolded. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, very carefully, "That man is lucky he's in Europe. Because if he was here, I'd have some strong words for him, possibly accompanied by my fists." Despite everything, Evelyn smiled. Violence isn't the answer, Mr. Reed. Maybe not, but it would be satisfying. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Evie, I need you to understand something. What that man did, that wasn't about you. It wasn't about any failing on your part. It was about his character, his choices, his moral bankruptcy. But I should have seen it, should have known. How? He was deliberately deceiving you. He was performing a role designed to fool you. That's not your fault. His voice was fierce with conviction. You trusted someone who presented himself as trustworthy. That's not naivety. That's how relationships are supposed to work. He betrayed that trust, and that's entirely on him. Everyone in Boston seemed to think it was my fault. Then everyone in Boston is wrong. And frankly, their judgment says more about them than about you. He reached out and took her hand gently. I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry people you trusted turned on you, but I'm grateful it brought you here because... He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. Because you're the first person since Caroline died who's made me think about a future that includes more than just work and responsibilities. You're smart and strong and kind, and when you smile, really smile, not that polite social mask, it lights up everything around you. He squeezed her hand. I know you're still healing. I know you're scared, but I want you to know that when you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'd be honored to be part of your future. Her breath caught. This was the closest he'd come to an actual declaration, and the sincerity in his voice made her chest ache. Silas, She didn't know what to say, how to put into words the complicated tangle of emotions his words evoked. You don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know how I feel. No pressure, no expectations, just honesty. She looked down at their joined hands, his so much larger than hers, work-roughened but gentle, holding hers like something precious. I care about you, she said quietly. More than I expected to. More than I thought I could care about anyone after what happened. But Silas, I'm so afraid. What if I'm wrong about you? What if this is just another mistake? Then it's a mistake we'll figure out together. But Evie, he waited until she looked up at him. I'm not him. I'm not going to lie to you or use you or hurt you deliberately. I'm just a rancher who works too hard and probably spends too much time alone and who thinks you're remarkable. That's all I am. All I can be. No hidden agendas, no secret motives. Just me. Just you, she repeated softly. Just me. Is that enough? She thought about the past months, the steady presence he'd been, the patience he'd shown, the respect he'd offered. The way he'd never once made her feel pressured or obligated. The way he looked at her like she mattered, like her thoughts and feelings were important. The way he'd shown her day after day what good character actually looked like. Yes, she heard herself say, just you is enough. His smile was slow and warm and absolutely devastating. Good. That's real good. He raised her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. A gesture that was both old-fashioned and deeply romantic. Then he released her hand and stepped back, maintaining proper distance, even though everything in his expression suggested he wanted to pull her close. We should head back before Beatrice sends a search party. She's probably watching us from the window. She absolutely is. They walked back to the house together, and Evelyn felt lighter than she had in months. Scared still, yes. Uncertain, definitely, but also hopeful. Maybe Beatrice had been right. Maybe taking a leap of faith, careful, measured, with eyes wide open, was exactly what she needed. The days that followed brought a subtle shift in their relationship. Nothing dramatic or scandalous, frontier propriety was strict, and both Silas and Evelyn were careful to maintain appropriate boundaries. But there was a new understanding between them, an acknowledgement of feelings and possibilities. He started appearing at the schoolhouse more often, usually with some pretext. Bringing Noah forgotten lunch, delivering lumber for new shelves, checking if the stove was drawing properly now that winter approached. He'd stay and help with small tasks, their conversation flowing easily while they worked. Evelyn found herself looking forward to these visits with an anticipation that made her feel simultaneously giddy and anxious. She'd catch herself watching for his wagon, listening for his footsteps on the porch, smiling at things he'd said hours earlier. It felt dangerously like falling in love. One afternoon in late October, Noah lingered after school, clearly wanting to say something, but hesitating. "What is it, Noah?" Evelyn asked gently. "Miss Hartwell, Evie." He corrected himself, using the informal name she'd given him permission to use. "Are you and Uncle Silas courting?" She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "What makes you ask that?" "He talks about you all the time, and he smiles more now." Mrs. Peterson told Mrs. Chen that Uncle Silas was finally moving on from Aunt Caroline, and Mrs. Chen said it was about time because 4 years is long enough to grieve. Noah, you shouldn't eavesdrop on adult conversations. I wasn't eavesdropping. They were talking really loud at the mercantile. He looked at her earnestly. I liked Aunt Caroline. She was nice to me, and she made good cookies, but she's been gone a long time, and Uncle Silas has been sad. I don't want him to be sad forever. Evelyn's heart squeezed. I don't want that either. So you do like him? Really like him? She could lie, deflect, maintain adult privacy. But Noah was asking with genuine concern for his uncle, and he deserved an honest answer. Yes, she said quietly. I really like him. Noah's face lit up. That's good, because he really likes you too. I can tell. And maybe... He hesitated. Maybe if you got married, I could call you Aunt Evie and we'd be a real family again. The hope in his voice was almost painful. This child who'd lost his aunt, who'd watched his uncle withdraw into grief, who wanted so badly for the adults he loved to be happy. Noah, we're not... courting doesn't always lead to... She stopped, realizing she was floundering. These things take time. We have to be sure. But you could be sure eventually, right? You're not going to leave like Miss Aldrich did? I'm not leaving Willow Creek. This is my home now, regardless of what happens with your uncle. Promise? I promise. He hugged her impulsively, 8 years old but already tall for his age, and she held him, thinking about families and futures and all the complicated ways people's lives intertwined. That evening, Silas came to collect Noah and found them organizing the classroom library by subject. Good system, he observed, watching them work. Dewey Decimal? Modified for a small school collection, Evelyn confirmed. But yes, the basic principle. Caroline would have approved. She was always trying to organize our ranch library, but I kept pulling books off shelves and forgetting to put them back properly. It was the first time he'd mentioned Caroline to Evelyn directly, and she appreciated the trust implicit in the casual reference. What kind of books do you prefer? She asked. History, mostly. Some poetry. Agricultural journals. He smiled slightly. I'm not as cultured as you, but I like to keep my mind engaged. Liking what you like doesn't make you uncultured. It makes you honest. That's a generous interpretation. It's an accurate one. She shelved another book. Noah mentioned your ranch library. I'd love to see it sometime. You're welcome anytime. Though, fair warning, it's not organized at all right now. You'd probably have an apoplexy. I'd enjoy the challenge of organizing it, actually. Might be a nice winter project. His expression shifted to something warm and pleased. I'd like that. Having you at the ranch, working on something together. That sounds... He paused. That sounds really good. The weight of unspoken meaning in those words settled between them. Working together. Building something together. A future together. Uncle Silas? Noah looked between them with barely suppressed excitement. Are you going to ask Evie to come for Thanksgiving? Silas cleared his throat. I was working up to it, actually. Evie, my brother Daniel and his family will be coming to the ranch for Thanksgiving, and I'd be honored if you'd join us. Beatrice and James are already invited, so you wouldn't be the only guest. I'd love to. Thank you. Good. That's good. He smiled, and she noticed the way it reached his eyes, the way it made him look younger, less burdened. Noah, we should head out. Evening chores won't wait. After they left, Evelyn stood in the quiet classroom, her heart full of something she was almost afraid to name. This was what it felt like to be courted by a good man. Not the calculated flattery she'd received from Charles, not the performance designed to manipulate, just genuine affection, honest communication, and shared moments that built slowly into something substantial. It was better than anything she'd imagined, and terrifying precisely because it mattered so much. November arrived with cold winds and the first snow flurries. Evelyn threw herself into preparing her students for the winter break and planning the school's Christmas program. But her thoughts kept drifting to Silas, to the way his hands had felt guiding her grip on the bat, to the fierce conviction in his voice when he defended her against Charles's betrayal, to the patient kindness he showed everyone around him. She was falling in love with him. She could admit that now, at least to herself. The question was whether she was brave enough to let herself fall completely. Thanksgiving Day dawned cold and clear. The Monroe wagon rattled up to the Reed Ranch mid-morning, and Evelyn felt her stomach flutter with nervous anticipation. She was about to meet Silas's family, his brother, sister-in-law, and their children. This felt significant, like a step towards something permanent. Daniel Reed turned out to be a slightly taller, slightly younger version of Silas, with the same steady demeanor and careful way of speaking. His wife Martha was warm and welcoming, their 3 children ranging from 12 down to 4. "So, you're the teacher Noah can't stop talking about," Daniel said, shaking Evelyn's hand. "It's good to finally meet you. My brother speaks highly of you as well." "Does he?" Evelyn couldn't help glancing at Silas, who suddenly seemed very interested in stoking the fire. "Oh yes. According to Silas, you're the smartest, kindest, most patient teacher Wyoming's ever seen." Martha smiled knowingly. "We were starting to think he'd invented you. He talks about you so much." "Martha," Silas said warningly, but there was no real heat in it. The day unfolded with chaotic warmth. Children underfoot, women working together in the kitchen, men handling the heavy tasks of bringing in wood and carving the turkey. Evelyn found herself absorbed into the family rhythm, working alongside Martha and Beatrice to prepare side dishes while sharing stories and laughter. This was what family felt like, she realized. Not the formal Boston dinners where every word was calculated for social impact, but this noisy, genuine gathering where people cared about each other without pretense. During dinner, seated beside Silas at the long table he'd built himself, Evelyn felt overwhelmingly grateful for this community that had welcomed her, for this family that was including her, for this man whose steady presence had become essential to her happiness. Silas's hand found hers under the table, a brief squeeze that said, "I'm glad you're here," and she squeezed back, unable to find words for the depth of her emotion. After the meal, while the children played and the adults relaxed in food-induced contentment, Daniel pulled Silas aside for what was clearly meant to be a private conversation, but Evelyn, helping Martha with dishes in the kitchen, couldn't help overhearing. "She's good for you, Silas. I haven't seen you this content since before Caroline passed." "I know. I just hope I don't mess it up. She's been hurt badly, and I'm trying to be patient, but Daniel—" Silas's voice dropped. "I'm falling in love with her, and I don't know if she'll ever be ready to trust someone enough for that." "Have you told her how you feel?" "Not in so many words. I don't want to pressure her." "Silas, patience is good, but clarity matters too. She needs to know where she stands with you. Otherwise, she's going to keep second-guessing everything, wondering if you're going to disappear or change or turn out to be someone else entirely." Their voices faded as they moved further from the kitchen, but Evelyn stood frozen at the sink, her hands still in the dishwater, Martha's knowing gaze on her. "He's a good man," Martha said quietly. "The best. Whatever happened to you before, whatever made you so careful, I can see it in how you watch him, like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. But Silas doesn't have other shoes. What you see is what you get, and what you get is a man who'd move mountains for someone he loves." "I'm trying to believe that," Evelyn whispered, "but it's hard." "Of course it is. Trust is always hard after betrayal." Martha handed her a dish to dry. "But here's the thing. You can't protect yourself from hurt by never taking risks. You can only miss out on joy. And Silas Reed offers a lot of joy, if you're willing to reach for it." That night, as Silas drove her and the Monroes home through the cold darkness, Evelyn found herself replaying his words. "I'm falling in love with her, not calculating her worth, not planning how to use her, just falling in love with her." When was the last time someone had loved her for herself, with no agenda attached? Maybe it was time to take Martha's advice, to reach for joy instead of hiding from hurt. Maybe it was time to trust again. The first real snow came the week after Thanksgiving, blanketing Willow Creek in white silence. Evelyn stood at the schoolhouse window, watching fat flakes drift past, her mind only half on the arithmetic lesson her students were working through. The other half kept circling back to what she'd overheard at the ranch, to Silas's confession that he was falling in love with her. She needed to talk to him, needed to be honest about her own feelings, about the fear that still gripped her heart even as it opened to him. But the weather had kept him away from town for 3 days, the roads too treacherous for casual travel. "Miss Hartwell?" Noah's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "I finished all the problems. Can I help Samuel with his? That's very kind of you, Noah. Yes, please do. She watched the boy move to sit beside little Samuel Peterson, explaining the concept of carrying numbers with patient clarity. So much like his uncle, that same gentle teaching style, that same ability to make people feel capable rather than stupid. The door burst open suddenly, bringing a gust of cold air, and Sheriff Dalton, his face tight with concern. Miss Hartwell, sorry to interrupt, but we've got a situation. The Murphy girl wandered off from their homestead this morning. They think she might have followed the creek toward town, but with this snow, he didn't need to finish. Everyone knew what could happen to a child lost in a blizzard. How old is she? 5. Little thing, doesn't talk much. Family's new to the area. Evelyn's heart clenched. 5 years old, lost in the snow. What do you need from me? Can you keep the children here? We're organizing a search party, but we don't want kids wandering home in this weather, and their parents are all going to be out looking. Of course, we'll stay as long as necessary. After the sheriff left, Evelyn faced her classroom full of worried faces. She made her voice calm and confident, the way she'd learned to do during the Kowalski crisis. All right, everyone, we're going to have an extended school day today while the adults search for Katie Murphy. That means we need to stay warm, stay busy, and trust that the grown-ups will find her safe. Thomas, can you bring in more firewood? Anna, help me inventory our food supplies. The rest of you, let's rearrange desks to make a warmer circle around the stove. Keeping the children occupied and calm consumed the next several hours. They sang songs, told stories, and worked on an impromptu art project decorating the classroom for Christmas. But as afternoon darkened toward evening and the wind picked up, howling around the schoolhouse walls, even the youngest children began to sense the gravity of the situation. What if they don't find her? Lily Peterson whispered, her eyes enormous. They'll find her, Evelyn said firmly, hoping she was right. The people in this town are good at taking care of each other. Just after 5 o'clock, the door opened again. This time it was Silas, snow crusted on his coat and hat, his face reddened from the cold. His eyes found Evelyn immediately. Any word? She asked. Nothing yet. I've been searching the north sector with the sheriff and some ranch hands. We're going back out, but I wanted to check. Do you need anything here? We're managing. How long can a child survive in this weather? His expression was grim. Not long. We need to find her soon. Noah stood up from where he'd been sitting with the younger children. Uncle Silas, I know where she might be. Every adult in the room turned to look at him. Silas crossed the room in 3 strides. What do you mean, son? The Murphy place is near Cotton Creek, right? And Katie's real shy, doesn't like loud noises. When I was little and scared, Aunt Caroline always said I'd hide in quiet places. His words came faster. There's a big hollow tree near where the creek bends east, about a 1/4 mile from their homestead. I found it last summer when we were fishing. It's warm inside, protected. If she was scared and cold, she might have crawled in there. Silas gripped Noah's shoulder. That's good thinking. You remember exactly where? Yes, sir. I can show you. No. Evelyn's voice was sharp. Noah, you're not going out in this storm. But I'm the only one who knows exactly where the tree is. Uncle Silas, tell her, we have to help Katie. Silas looked between his nephew and Evelyn, clearly torn. He's right about knowing the location. And Evie, every minute counts. He's 8 years old. I'm almost 9, Noah protested. And I know those woods better than most adults. Please, Evie, I have to help. She wanted to refuse, to keep this child safe inside where nothing could happen to him. But she saw the determination in his young face, the desperate need to do something useful. And she understood she'd felt that same need herself during the Kowalski fire. You stay right beside your uncle, she finally said. You don't leave his side for even a moment. Promise me. I promise. Silas met her eyes over Noah's head. I'll keep him safe. I swear it. I know you will. Just... Her voice broke slightly. Come back. Both of you. Something passed between them in that moment, an acknowledgement of feelings too deep to voice in a crowded schoolhouse. Then Silas bundled Noah into his own heavy coat, and they disappeared into the storm. The wait was agony. Evelyn kept the children busy, kept her voice steady, kept her fear locked down where they couldn't see it. But inside she was screaming. Silas and Noah were out there in the blizzard, searching for a lost child who might already be past saving. What if they didn't come back? What if the storm took them too? She'd only just admitted to herself that she loved him. She couldn't lose him now. Beatrice arrived around 6 with supplies and support, and together they organized an impromptu supper from their combined resources. The children ate quietly, their usual energy subdued by worry and the oppressive howl of the wind. It was nearly 7 when the door burst open again. This time it was Mr. Murphy carrying a small bundled form, followed by a crowd of snow-covered searchers. Behind them came Silas and Noah, both looking frozen but triumphant. "She's alive!" Mr. Murphy's voice cracked with emotion. "Found her in a hollow tree, just like the Reed boy said. She's cold and scared, but Doc Henderson says she'll be fine." The schoolhouse erupted in relieved chaos. Parents who'd been part of the search party collected their children with tearful gratitude. Katie Murphy was rushed to the doctor's office. And through it all, Evelyn could only stare at Silas and Noah, relief making her legs weak. When the crowd finally thinned, she crossed to where they stood warming themselves by the stove. "You found her," she said unnecessarily. "Noah found her," Silas corrected, his hand on his nephew's shoulder. "Kid's got good instincts." Noah's face was alight with pride despite his obvious exhaustion. "She was right where I thought, curled up in the hollow. She was so cold Uncle Silas had to carry her the whole way back." "You both did wonderfully." Evelyn wanted to hug them, to hold them close and reassure herself they were really safe, but propriety held her back. Instead, she said, "You need to get home, get warm and dry before you catch your death. Will you come with us?" The question came from Noah, but his uncle's eyes held the same hope. "Just to make sure we get there safe, the roads are bad." It was a transparent excuse, but Evelyn found herself nodding anyway. Beatrice offered to close up the schoolhouse, and within minutes Evelyn was bundled into Silas's wagon between him and Noah, the three of them pressed close for warmth under heavy blankets. The drive to the ranch was slow and careful, Silas navigating by instinct and memory through the blowing snow. But there was something almost peaceful about it too. The intimacy of the enclosed space, the shared warmth, the comfortable silence between them. At the ranch, Silas built up the fire while Evelyn heated water for tea and found dry clothes for Noah. The boy was practically asleep on his feet by the time she got him changed and settled on the sofa with a quilt. "I'm proud of you," she told him softly. "You saved Katie's life today." "We saved her," Noah mumbled. "Me and Uncle Silas and you, 'cause you let us go even though you were scared." "How did you know I was scared?" "Your hands were shaking when you fixed my coat, but you let us go anyway. That's what Aunt Caroline used to say real bravery is, being scared but doing the right thing anyway." He was asleep before she could respond, but his words lodged in her heart. Being scared but doing the right thing anyway. Maybe that applied to more than just search parties. Silas appeared from the back room in dry clothes, his hair still damp from washing away the snow. "Is he out?" "Completely. It's been a long day for him." "For all of us." He moved to the stove, pouring 2 cups of tea and handing her one. "Thank you for letting him come. I know it scared you." "It terrified me." But he was right. He knew where to look, and that knowledge saved Katie's life. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup. "He's a remarkable boy." "He is. Takes after his mother in that. Daniel's wife, Martha, is one of the strongest people I know." Silas settled into the chair across from her. "But Noah's got something special of his own. That kind of empathy, that ability to think like someone else would think, that's rare." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the fire crackling, the storm still raging outside but unable to touch them in this warm, safe space. Evelyn found herself studying Silas's face, the strong lines of it, the weariness in his eyes, the quiet satisfaction of a hard job done well. "What you did today was incredibly brave," she said finally. "Just what needed doing. No, you risked your life, took your nephew into a blizzard, all to save a child you barely know. That's not just doing what needs doing, that's heroism." He looked uncomfortable with the praise. Any decent person would have done the same. Charles wouldn't have. He wouldn't have even noticed a missing child unless it somehow benefited him to care. The words came out before she could stop them, bitter and revealing. Silas was quiet for a moment. Then he said carefully, "I'm not him, Evie. I know. I know you're not. It's just—" She set down her teacup with shaking hands. "Today, when you walked out that door into the storm with Noah, I was terrified. Not just worried, but genuinely terrified that you wouldn't come back. And I realized something." "What?" She looked at him directly, her heart pounding. "I realized I can't keep holding you at arm's length because I'm afraid of being hurt again. Because the truth is, I'm already in deep enough that losing you would destroy me. So I might as well admit it and stop pretending I'm protecting myself." His expression shifted, hope and caution warring in his eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I love you." The words came out raw and honest. "I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe during that first dance at the barn raising, or maybe when you caught me with the coffee pot, or maybe just gradually over these months of watching you be consistently, relentlessly good. But I love you, and I'm tired of being afraid of that." Silas set down his own cup very carefully, as if afraid sudden movement might shatter the moment. Then he crossed to her, kneeling beside her chair so their eyes were level. "Say it again," he said quietly. "I love you, Silas Reed. I love your patience and your kindness and the way you listen when people talk. I love how you care for Noah and how you help the Kowalskis and how you went into a blizzard to save a little girl you barely know. I love that you read poetry and work hard and never make promises you can't keep. I love—" Her voice broke. "I love that you make me feel safe." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "I love you too, Evie Hartwell. Have for a while now, if I'm honest. You're the bravest, smartest, most stubborn woman I've ever met. You took heartbreak that would have destroyed most people and turned it into strength. You left everything familiar and built a whole new life. You take care of everyone around you while barely letting anyone take care of you." His voice gentled. "But I'd like to take care of you, if you'll let me. Not because you need it, but because I want to. Because caring for you would be an honor." "I'm still scared," she whispered. "I know, so am I. Loving someone means risking loss. I learned that with Caroline. But Evie, the love was worth the loss. Every moment with her was worth the grief that came after. And I believe—" He took her hand, pressing it against his heart. "I believe what we could have together would be worth any risk." She could feel his heartbeat under her palm, steady and strong. This man who'd lost his wife and survived, who'd taken his shattered heart and painstakingly rebuilt it, who was offering her the pieces with full knowledge that she might break them again. That took courage she was only beginning to understand. "I'm broken," she said, the words she'd been carrying since Boston finally spoken aloud. "I'm damaged and scarred, and I don't know if I'll ever fully trust the way I did before." "Then let me be the one to hold the pieces." His words were fierce with conviction. "Let me stand beside you while you heal. I'm not asking you to be perfect or whole or completely healed. I'm just asking you to let me love you, scars and all." Something inside her cracked open, not breaking, but opening, like ice giving way to spring thaw. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll let you." His arms came around her then, holding her close, and she let herself sink into the embrace, let herself feel safe and wanted and loved without questioning the motives behind it. Let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, not all men were like Charles. That maybe this good man with his careful hands and patient heart really meant everything he said. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in the warmth of the fire, the storm raging outside but unable to touch them. Noah slept on obliviously. And slowly, carefully, Evelyn began to believe she might actually be allowed happiness. When she finally pulled back, Silas's expression was so tender it made her chest ache. "I should get you back to town before Beatrice sends another search party," he said reluctantly. "Probably wise, though I suspect she's already planning our wedding. Is she now?" His smile was slow and devastating. "Any chance you'd be amenable to her plans?" "Are you asking me to marry you, Mr. Reed?" "Not yet. When I ask you properly, it'll be with a ring and flowers and the right words." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "But I'm letting you know that I will be asking, soon. So you might want to start thinking about your answer. I'll take it under advisement." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and she realized she'd never heard him laugh quite like that before. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger and lighter. "Come on," he said, standing and pulling her gently to her feet. "Let's get you home before the storm gets worse." The drive back to town was slow and careful, Silas keeping the horses to a walk through the deepening snow. They didn't talk much, didn't need to. Everything important had already been said, but his hand found hers under the blanket, fingers intertwining, and that simple touch said more than words could. At the Monroe house, he helped her down from the wagon and walked her to the door despite the driving snow. "Thank you," she said, "for today, for everything." "Nothing to thank me for." He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Sleep well, Evie. I'll see you Sunday." She watched him drive away into the storm, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. Then she went inside to face Beatrice's inevitable interrogation. Her cousin was waiting in the parlor, trying and failing to look casual. "So, you were gone quite a while." "Katie Murphy was found. She's going to be fine." "I heard. The whole town's talking about it. They're also talking about how you left with Silas and Noah and didn't come back for 2 hours. Evelyn felt heat rise in her cheeks. "We were at the ranch. They needed to warm up and change into dry clothes." "I'm sure that's all that happened." Beatrice's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Though you're glowing in a way that suggests maybe something else happened too." Did he kiss you? Please tell me he finally kissed you." "He kissed my forehead." Beatrice threw up her hands. "That man's patience is going to kill me. When is he going to actually court you properly?" "He is courting me properly, and Evelyn couldn't hold back her smile any longer. "I told him I love him." Her cousin's shriek of delight brought James running from his study. "What happened? Is someone hurt?" "She told him she loves him." Beatrice grabbed Evelyn's hands, bouncing with excitement. "Finally! Oh, Evie, I'm so happy for you." "Who loves who?" James asked, confused. "Evie and Silas, obviously. Where have you been?" "Working, unlike some people who apparently spend all their time monitoring romance." But James was smiling as he patted Evelyn's shoulder. "That's good news, Evie. Silas is a fine man. You'll be happy with him." "He hasn't actually proposed yet," Evelyn protested. "He will," Beatrice said confidently. "Mark my words, before Christmas you'll be engaged. I can feel it." Lying in bed that night, listening to the storm finally begin to quiet, Evelyn thought about Beatrice's prediction. Marriage, a future with Silas, building a life together on the frontier. 6 months ago, the idea would have terrified her. 3 months ago, she would have dismissed it as impossible. But now? Now it felt like coming home. The days following the blizzard brought a subtle shift in how the town viewed Evelyn and Silas. People who'd been watching their careful courtship with interest now smiled knowingly when they saw them together. Mrs. Peterson made pointed comments about June being a lovely month for weddings. Even Reverend Thompson mentioned that he'd be happy to perform a ceremony anytime they were ready. Evelyn found she didn't mind the attention as much as she would have expected. Let them gossip and speculate. She was happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in longer than she could remember. School days were busy with Christmas preparations, the children rehearsing songs and recitations for the holiday program, making decorations and small gifts for their parents. But Evelyn found her mind wandering during quiet moments, daydreaming about a future that suddenly seemed possible. What would it be like to be married to Silas? To wake up beside him every morning, to share meals and conversation and the quiet intimacy of daily life? To build something permanent together, a partnership based on mutual respect and genuine affection? The thought simultaneously thrilled and terrified her. Sunday dinner at the Reed Ranch became a weekly tradition. Evelyn would help prepare the meal while Silas worked on small repairs or caught up on paperwork, Noah darting between them with questions and stories. It felt remarkably domestic, like playing house except it was real. One Sunday in mid-December, after Noah had been sent to do his chores and they had a rare moment of privacy, Silas pulled a small package from his desk drawer. "I have something for you," he said, looking almost nervous. "It's not much, but I wanted you to have it." Inside the brown paper was a book, a beautiful leather-bound volume of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, the pages edged in gold. "Silas, this is too much." "It's not enough. But I saw it in the catalog and thought of you, how you love poetry, how you light up when you talk about literature." He opened to a page he'd marked. "This passage especially reminded me of you." She read the lines he'd indicated, her throat tightening with emotion. "Not I, nor anyone else can travel that road for you. You must travel it by yourself. It is not far. It is within reach. Perhaps you have been on it since you were born and did not know. Perhaps it is everywhere, on water and land." "You've traveled your own road," Silas said quietly, "from Boston to here, from heartbreak to healing. Nobody did that for you. You did it yourself. And I'm honored that you're letting me walk beside you now." She looked up at him through tears she didn't bother to hide. "How do you always know exactly what to say?" "I don't. Just speak what's in my heart and hope it's right." She set the book down carefully and moved into his arms, letting him hold her while she cried, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude for this gift, for this man, for this unexpected happiness. "I love you," she murmured against his chest. "I love you so much it scares me." "I know. I feel the same." His hand stroked her hair gently. "But maybe we can be scared together. Maybe that's how it works. You take the leap and trust someone will catch you." "Will you? Catch me?" "Every single time." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. "Evie, I want to ask you something, but I need you to think carefully before you answer." Her heart kicked into high gear. "All right. Not here. Come with me." He led her outside to the porch, where the December sun was trying valiantly to warm the frigid air. The snow from the blizzard still covered everything, sparkling like diamonds in the light. The view stretched endlessly, rolling white hills, distant mountains, the vast Wyoming sky. Silas took both her hands in his expression serious and tender. "Evie, I know we agreed I'd wait to ask properly, but standing here with you, thinking about the future, I can't wait anymore." He took a deep breath. "I don't have a ring yet. I'll get you the finest one I can find, I promise. But I need to know, will you marry me? Will you build a life here with me and Noah? Will you let me love you for the rest of our days?" She looked at him, really looked at him. At the hope and vulnerability in his eyes, the strength in his shoulders, the hands that held hers so carefully. This man who'd waited patiently while she healed, who'd shown her by constant example what good character looked like, who was offering her everything he had with no expectation of receiving equal value in return. This man who'd taught her that not all love came with conditions attached. "Yes," she said, her voice strong and certain. "Yes, I'll marry you." His smile was incandescent. He lifted her off her feet, spinning her around while she laughed, her arms around his neck, her heart so full she thought she might float away. When he set her down, his hands framed her face, and he looked at her like she was the most precious thing he'd ever held. "I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret this," he said fiercely. "I know you will. That's why I said yes." Then he kissed her, not on the forehead this time, but properly, his lips meeting hers with a tenderness that made her knees weak. It was everything a first kiss should be, and nothing like Charles's calculating advances. This was honest and sweet and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "How soon?" he asked. "How soon will you marry me?" "Whenever you want. Tomorrow, if possible." He laughed. "Beatrice would murder us both if we didn't give her time to plan properly. But soon, Evie. I don't want to wait long." "Neither do I." They stood there on the porch, wrapped in each other's arms, making plans for a future that suddenly seemed bright and certain. Inside, they could hear Noah singing off-key while he did his chores, blissfully unaware that his life was about to change in the best possible way. "Should we tell him?" Eveline asked. "In a minute. First, I want to just stand here with you and feel how happy I am." He held her closer. "I didn't think I'd get this again. After Caroline died, I thought that part of my life was over. But you—" his voice roughened. You brought me back to life. You reminded me that the heart can heal if you're patient enough and brave enough to let it. You did the same for me. You showed me what real love looks like, patient and kind and honest. You gave me back my ability to trust. Then we saved each other. Yes, I think we did. When they finally went inside to tell Noah, the boy's reaction was everything they could have hoped for. He whooped with joy, nearly tackling Evelyn with the force of his hug. I'm going to have an Aunt Evie, a real aunt. Wait until I tell everyone at school. Maybe let us tell our families first, Silas suggested, but he was grinning too widely to be very stern. Can I be in the wedding, please? I want to have an important job. Of course you can. We couldn't get married without you. That evening, when Silas drove Evelyn back to town, they made plans to tell Beatrice and James together. But when they arrived at the Monroe house, Beatrice took one look at Evelyn's face and knew. Oh my word, he proposed. Yes. And you said yes. Yes. Beatrice's scream of delight probably woke half the neighborhood. She pulled Evelyn into a crushing hug while James shook Silas's hand with hearty congratulations. When? Beatrice demanded. When's the wedding? We were thinking February, Silas said. After the worst of winter, but before spring planning gets too busy, if that works for everyone. February? That's only 2 months away. Oh my goodness, we have so much to do. Beatrice was already mentally planning, Evelyn could tell. We'll need to make your dress and arrange the church and plan the reception and breathe. I can't breathe. My cousin is getting married to the best man in Wyoming. This is the most exciting thing that's happened in Willow Creek in years. Later, alone in her room, Evelyn sat at her desk and opened her journal for the first time in weeks. She stared at the blank page for a long moment, then began to write. December 15th, 1876. 6 months ago, I arrived in Willow Creek broken and certain I would never trust anyone again. I thought love was a lie told by men who wanted to use you, that kindness was just manipulation in disguise. But I was wrong. Today, Silas Reed asked me to marry him, and I said yes. Not because he's wealthy or charming or socially prominent. He's none of those things. I said yes because he's good, because he's patient and kind and honest, because he sees me clearly with all my scars and fears and loves me anyway, because he taught me that real love doesn't demand perfection. It just offers partnership. I'm still scared sometimes. I still have moments where I wonder if I'm making a mistake, if I'm trusting too much too soon. But then I remember how he looked at me when he proposed, the certainty in his voice when he promised to catch me every time I fall. And I believe him. Maybe that's what healing looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the courage to move forward despite it. Not forgetting the past, but refusing to let it dictate the future. I thought coming to Wyoming meant running away, but I was actually running toward something, toward this life, this love, this man who makes me want to be brave. I'm not completely whole yet. Maybe I never will be. But I'm learning that wholeness isn't the point. The point is being willing to try, to trust, to open your heart even when it's been shattered before. Tomorrow, we'll tell the town. There will be gossip and speculation and opinions, but for tonight, I'm just going to sit here and feel happy, purely, simply happy. Because I'm engaged to Silas Reed, and I'm going to be his wife, and that feels like the best decision I've ever made. She closed the journal and looked out at the winter night, at the stars brilliant against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, Silas was probably doing the same thing, looking at the same stars, thinking about the same future. Their future. Together. The thought made her smile, and for once, she didn't question the happiness or wait for it to be snatched away. She just let herself feel it, warm and certain and real. News of the engagement spread through Willow Creek with the speed of wildfire. By the time school resumed Monday morning, every child already knew, and Evelyn spent the first hour answering questions about wedding dates and dresses, and whether Noah would get to stand up at the altar with his uncle. The women of Willow Creek immediately took charge of preparations with the kind of military efficiency that would have impressed any general. Mrs. Peterson organized the church decorations committee. Mrs. Chen volunteered to coordinate the reception food. Even gruff Doc Henderson offered to contribute his best whiskey for the toast. Evelyn found herself swept up in a whirlwind of planning that was both exhausting and oddly comforting. These people cared about her, wanted to celebrate with her, saw her happiness as something worth honoring. It was so different from the calculated social obligations of Boston that she sometimes had to stop and marvel at how much her life had changed. Silas came to town 3 times a week now, helping with school repairs while stealing moments alone with Eveline whenever propriety allowed. They talked about everything, their hopes for the future, their fears, the practical realities of merging their lives. He asked her opinion on ranch decisions. She sought his advice on difficult students. They were building a partnership, learning the rhythms of each other's thoughts and moods. One afternoon in early January, Silas arrived at the schoolhouse after hours with a small velvet box. "I promised you a proper ring," he said, suddenly looking nervous in a way she'd never seen before. Inside was a simple gold band set with 3 small garnets. Not diamonds, but the deep red stones somehow suited her better. "It's not fancy," Silas said quickly, "but the jeweler in Cheyenne said garnets represent devotion and strength, and I thought—" He paused. "I thought they reminded me of you, strong and beautiful and enduring." Tears blurred her vision as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." "You're sure? Because I could order something finer, something with—" She silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. When they broke apart, she held up her hand, admiring the way the garnets caught the light. "It's perfect, because you chose it for me. Because it means something. That's worth more than all the diamonds in Boston." His smile was relieved and tender.